Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Ichigo was in the DxD universe? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Jermaine94 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Rukia. Ichigo shot down from above the dome, picking up crazy speed since he kinda pushed off the top of the down and launched himself like a tiny rocket. He closed in on the desperate figure of Rukia, who didn't notice his arrival, or him taking her in his arms, or even him landing on the roof of the small building that was miraculously still standing. She watched him turn away from her, the sleeve of his Bankai outfit dancing in the wind, and the remnants of the tattered tail being thrown around. She couldn't see his eyes, but she could feel the disappointment pouring off him. He didn't even look at her, but he turned his head slightly, and she saw his. "Stay here, Rukia. I'll take care of this quickly." She watched him launch himself at the giant that was the Zero Espada, Yami Largo. She watched him as he baited the monster away from their fallen comrades, the giant barely noticing what he was doing. Without warning, Yami was struck in the neck by a full-powered black Jutsuga, and he slammed into the sands of Las Notches. Rukia froze when she saw the pattern on his mask, and even from that distance, she could see the difference. She remembered hearing that the pattern on his mask gradually changed from one stripe across the left eye to basically the full left side covered in red. But this was completely different. It was basically a skull with the two black lines that went over each eye. Suddenly, Yami burst out back from the sands, blood sliding down his neck from a small wound. Ichigo dodged the incoming fist and Yami placed a hand on the wound. "DCH, you actually managed to cut me a little, that's a lot more than what those other insects could do." He glared at Ichigo, who was staring at the small wound in shock. That was a full-powered Holofi Jutsuga. And he only got such a small wound. He quickly snapped back into gear as his instincts flared to life, and he dodged the incoming fist, only to land in the path of an open hand, which wrapped around him, holding him in place. He could feel the fingers of the giant taking his life away, and he could feel his bones cracking. Screaming in pain, he struggled valiantly to free himself from the iron grip, but his struggles were in vain. He hadn't recovered enough Ryatsu to free himself. And he could call on his maska again as he couldn't sustain this new mask long. Suddenly, his world lurched to the side and the fingers that were wrapped around him went limp. He could hear the pained shout from the Zero Espada before plummeting from about 100 feet straight down into the sands, where he found himself facing the captain of Squad 11, Kenpachi Zaraki, and the captain of Squad 6, Kichiki Byakuya. He looked up at them in wonder before noticing the bloodthirsty Squad 11 captain raise his sword and quickly dodge to the side, only to be thrown across the sands as the sword almost cut him in half. He stared at the man in shock. "Beth." The yawn caught his attention. He looked up from the book he was reading from and noticed the violet-haired young girl sitting across from him, attempting to keep sleep away by furiously rubbing her eyes. She looked up at him, a pleading look in her amber eyes. "Dad, don't stop. You were just getting to the good part. Please." She gave him the dreaded puppy dog eyes, but the man just chuckled. "You're half asleep. Besides, this can wait. Off to bed you go, Senna." The girl sighed, and just as she went to rebut him, she let out a massive yawn. She looked at him sheepishly and chuckled when he raised an eyebrow in a knowing fashion. "Right. Not tired at all. Off to bed. Remember your duties beforehand, young lady." She nodded and stood up, popping her joints as she did so. She skipped over to his side and at him on the dot. "Good night, Dad. See you in the morning." She skipped off, stopping at the door to wave at him. He sighed and closed the book that was resting on the open page on his lap, making sure to place a bookmark on the page. He replaced the book on the shelf of the massive bookcase that was only the first of many in the library. He quietly exited, noticing the guard standing quietly across the corridor, keeping an eye on his daughter. Thanking the man from the other side of the corridor, he proceeded to make his way back down the winding corridors before ending up in a large throne room. Sighing, he walked up to the throne and dropped himself into it, massaging his temples in an attempt to rid himself of the weariness that was threatening to send him off to sleep. Yawning, he completely missed the entrance of a young, violet-haired woman who proceeded to stand beside him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, expecting him to jump at her sudden appearance, but pouted when he turned to face her, a smile on his face, his crimson eyes staring into her yellow eyes. "Hello, my love. Glad to see you could make it." He turned back to look down the throne room, the red carpet, a strong contrast against the black walls. He frowned. "I think we need to paint the castle. I'm thinking an intense neon blue." He swiped his arm through the air, changing the color of the walls to his liking, before instantly changing his mind and returning the color to black. Soft laughter from beside him made him turn back to face the young woman. "Oh, Ichigo. That was horrible. I couldn't stand everything being so bright." She reached up and ran her hand through his long black hair, which was tied in a loose ponytail. He leaned into her touch. Now that she is here, with us, everything is much brighter, Anna. He gave her a smile, which she happily returned. She leaned down and gave him a quick but deep He looked back down the room before clicking his fingers, a servant appearing by his side in an instant. Yes, my lord. He gave a deep bow. I heard there was someone who wanted to see me today. I had been putting off meeting this fellow for a few months. Actually, I put off seeing everyone for a few months so we could take care of little Senna. Can you contact this man and tell him that I would be more than happy to make up for lost time and see him within the next couple days at his discretion. Also, could you go fetch Kisuke for me? Thank you, Daros. With his orders in hand, Daros vanished. Anna walked over and sat on Ichigo's lap, leaning back into him. So, my king, how far did you get in your story time with Senna? Ichigo laughed softly before wrapping his arms around her waist. Well, my darling queen, we are well into the invasion of Wako Mundo. I had just defeated Ulquiorra, saved Rukia from falling, and Byakuya and Zaraki have rocked up to take on Yami. I can't believe that Kisuke actually wrote a book about me, but I'm kinda glad he did. But, did he have to call it Memoirs of Hell's King? Seriously, they aren't my memoirs. He sighed at the antics of his oldest friend. He and Kisuke had fought together for well over 1,000 years. Both being there to witness each other's grief when the news that Central 46 had ordered the destruction of both the Shiba and the Shihoin houses because they were allies of the Rouge substitute Shinigami Kurosaki Ichigo. Of course, the Gotei had vehemently opposed the orders, even going as far as to begin a revolt against Central, but what they didn't count on was Central removing them from their positions and installing new neo-captains who were basically leash dogs to complete their orders. When they heard about the treachery of Central, both Ichigo and Kisuke invaded Soul Society, tearing through these so-called captains with relative ease. The two then stormed the meeting hall, where the neo-captains retreated to in order to regroup. Needless to say, it was a massacre. Both Ichigo and Kisuke were responsible for toppling the corrupt Central 46 and their dogs in at least 3 hours. Once Central was destroyed, Ichigo basically forced the old man to take up the mantle of leader of Soul Society, not even caring that it was meant to be Central 46 that ruled. They had screwed up enough times to prove that they weren't capable of running the place. Once Yamamoto accepted the position, more like couldn't refuse, he had already changed the structure of Soul Society. Ichigo and Kisuke watched on as Mayuri was stripped of his position and thrown back into the maggot's nest, powerless and squadless. His daughter, Nemu, had been given the position of captain, and what a job she has done. She destroyed all semblance of the horror that was the Research and Development Division and focused completely on advancing the technology of Soul Society, changing the squad into the Research and Advancements Division, or RAD. With her passion for the modern technology from the world of the living and the combined want for better medicines and practices by Unohana, the grumpy fossil finally relented and ordered the immediate advancement of all technology within the Soul Society. Nemu had a field day. Ichigo and Kisuke heard a year later that Yukitake Taicho had been cured of his disease thanks to the medical advancements pushed forth by Unohana. Even though Soul Society had advanced so much and come a long way in terms of structure, Ichigo and Kisuke never set foot within the spiritual plane again. Instead, they dedicated themselves to finding the reincarnations of the people they lost. It didn't take long, but Ichigo was the first to find someone, and he was surprised to realize that he had actually found Kain, Kukaku and Ganju all together again within the walls of New Lilith. Since finding them, Ichigo kept to hell, Kisuke faithfully by his side. Together, they fought the old Mao faction after the Great War, in which his friend and the then ruler of Hell, Lucifer, was killed. If it weren't for the involvement of both Ichigo and Kisuke, the Surziches, Serafal, Akuja and Falbium wouldn't have won the war that quickly. It would have taken many more years of war and many more lives would have been lost. Once the war was over, Surziches took the throne of Lucifer, but instead of being the ruler of Hell, he gave the position to Ichigo, who wore the armor of Hell, which he had gained when he invaded to free his sister from the clutches of sinners all those years ago. Ichigo ran his hand through his hair. Nostalgia sinking in as he realized that it had been almost 500 years since he had become the king of Hell, leaving the running of the place to the four mass. He did a mental tally. I arrived here 15 years after defeating Sasuke, which was about 1500 years ago. I wandered about with Kisuke for probably 500 years, it was during that time that we invaded Soul Society and destroyed Central. After we returned, we wandered some more before running into Lucifer, who set me up with some nice digs. Then the Great War started about 400 years after that, which lasted for 100 years. After that, the Civil War started, with the old Mao faction wanting to remain in charge, but little Surziches and his merry friends wanted to change this place for the better. It was during that war that I met Anna, and it was after the war that we married. Surziches, Sarah, Akuja and Falbium took over the major roles when I was given the throne, basically meaning I get to kick back and chill while they run the country. It was a good plan at the time, and it still is a good plan. Senna was born 12 years ago, and I'm thinking that for her birthday, I take her to Kyoto. I'm sure that Hanami would be more than delighted to see me again. He closed his crimson eyes and allowed the soft humming that came from Anna to lull him to sleep, but the arrival of Kisuke tore him from his almost sleep-like state. "Ichigo. You called for me?" said man looked at him before dropping his forehead onto Anna's back where his muffled voice sounded out. "Yeah, I did. Within the next couple days, I'm gonna meet this person who has been wanting to meet me for a couple months, but since Senna got sick, I haven't been seeing anyone. After, I was planning on taking both Senna and Anna to Kyoto, so I would like you to contact Hanami, even though I hear she isn't the leader of Kyoto anymore. Apparently, her daughter, called Yasaka, is in charge now. So send a letter to both of them. Then, as much as it pains me to say this, I want you to send a letter to Gochin. I think it's time he and the girls meet Senna." He sighed, but relaxed when Anna leaned her head on his. Kisuke coughed. "Ichigo, we swore to never set foot in Soul Society again. I've heard they had installed a new central system." Ichigo moved from the warmth of his wife and gave the blonde former shopkeeper a sad smile. "Kisuke, I think it's time. We haven't set foot there in about 1,000 years. I hear that the new central system has to answer to not only the new Sutaicho, but the Council of Captains, which, mind you, was about 1,000 years too late. They have changed. If not, we can kill everyone and let it star." He was cut off mid-sentence as Anna spectacularly elbow dropped onto the top of his head, her small frame backing a lot of hidden power. Kisuke laughed. "Seems like the queen is stronger than the king. Anna, you truly deserve the title of strongest queen. I wonder why you gave it to Mrs. Lucifuge." Anna, who had finished reprimanding Ichigo, turned to Kisuke. "I gave it to her because Ichigo and I decided to not play a major role in the establishment of the new order. We were both from the old Mag faction, since we were sided with Lucifer during the Great War. Sure, he wasn't the greatest person, but he held this place together in a fragile peace. Once he was gone, the remnants of the faction wanted to control the people, while the new generation wanted the people to live free, happy lives, without the worry of being subjugated with tyranny. I was surprised when I found out that Surziches had married Grafia, and I gave her the title of strongest queen after teaching her everything I know." Speech over, she focused back on Ichigo, who was attempting to sneak away. Noticing he had failed, he ran, but Anna just smiled and let him go. He has really been working hard. Even though he has kept away from the four Mau, he still plays a major hand in their decisions. Anna turned to Kisuke, who had climbed the small stairs that lead to the throne. Ichigo doesn't show it, but he's tired. I think he's had enough of ruling and just wants to enjoy himself. He has regressed, wouldn't you say? Anna looked back in the direction that Ichigo ran in. "Yes, Kisuke, he has. I remember him during the Great War. With a swing of Zangetsu, he would make mountains vanish. A punch could make a hole in even the strongest enemy. Not even the Viceroy of the Fallen Angels, Azazel, or even the Great Seraph of Heaven Michael, would challenge Ichigo, or you by extension. He has mellowed out over time and has regressed back into the person he was before the Civil War. Once the Great War ended, his childish and humorous personality is what endeared me to him. He was always a loving person, always. But the Civil War became too much for him, and he decided that the world shouldn't be under the thumbs of the old Mag faction, so he came to us and said that he would openly support Surziches and his band of merry friends. And thus, we went back to war." She sighed and dropped into the throne. Kisuke looked down at her with concern. "Anna, are you okay?" She smiled at him. "I'm fine, Kisuke, just tired. With Senna being as sick as she was, neither Ichigo or I got much sleep. One of us was always by her side. Senna was a blessing to us, Kisuke, and I don't know what we would have done if we had lost her." Kisuke nodded solemnly. "It truly was a devastating season for Devil's Flu. Thankfully Ichigo came to me and I went to Anohana, who went to Nemu. She asked to meet me to give me the vaccine, even though we met outside in the world of the living. Anna, Ichigo, yourself and I were in the same boat. I don't know what I would have done if I had lost my goddaughter." Anna watched him lean on the throne, his gray eyes steeled with resolve. "Since Ichigo said it was time to return to Soul Society, then return we will. I shall make preparations for the Kyoto trip, then the Soul Society visit. Have a lovely night, Anna." With that, he gave her a quick bow and walked off, vanishing with burst of shumpo. Anna watched him leave, sadness rolling off him in waves. She had been there when Ichigo found his family in New Lilith, which gave Kisuke hope for finding the one person he trusted more than Ichigo. Sadly, even after searching for 1,000 years, there was no trace of Yoruichi Shihoin, much to the disappointment of both Ichigo and Kisuke. But, like a true friend, Ichigo never gave up the search and still had people scouring the world of the living and hell for any sign of the work cat. Taking a deep breath, Anna stood and walked away from the throne, which seemed to display sadness as she walked away. She stood outside of Senna's room, watching Ichigo as he slowly closed the door. Ever since she got sick, he had been watching her sleep for a bit to ensure that she was breathing properly. A couple times when things got bad, she had thanked him for being his overprotective self, because if he hadn't been there, then Senna would have been in serious trouble. He looked at her and gave her a genuine smile. He pulled her into him and at her gently. She dropped her head onto his chest and let out a long sigh, and Ichigo began to run his hands through her violet hair. She's sleeping peacefully. I didn't know what to do, Anna. So I went to the one person who did. Kisuke. I told him to do everything in his power to help her. I know he went to Soul Society for aid and it must have been a very difficult thing for him. So I think my little surprise for him would brighten his mood. Anna looked at him, confusion on her tired face. Not here, you'll scream. He began leading her back to their room, noticing the guard who was standing at the end of the corridor. Stram. Thank you, old friend. I swear, you'll get a hefty bonus for this. He pat the old soldier on the shoulder, but he waved him off. Ichigo, there is no need. I do this cause I care for the princess. She really brightened up this place when she was born. If I have to stay awake for 1,000 nights for her, then 1,000 nights I shall stay awake. Ichigo smiled at him. Thank you, Knight Captain Stramfausend, for your loyalty. The knight bowed. Thank you, my king, Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo. And you, my queen, Shiba Anna. Anna leaned in and gave him on the dot. They then decided to leave the knight to his duties and started the walk back to their room, which happened to be above Senna's room, a door hidden in the roof for quick responses to emergencies. Since there wasn't a rush, they took a leisurely stroll through the castle. Ichigo, you said you left Kisuke a surprise. What is it? Ichigo smiled, a true genuine heartfelt smile. I found Yoruichi Shihoin. 15 minutes prior. Kisuke left Anna to begin preparations for their trip to Kyoto. He knew quite a bit about the Shinto faction and the fact that the ruler of Kyoto, the current ruler, is a young woman called Yasaka. Apparently, she might be Ichigo's first daughter since he had a tryst with Hanami before being brought to hell. Ichigo had confided this in him and he hadn't spoken a word to anyone. If word got out that the ruler of the Kyoto Yakai might be the daughter of the king of hell, then alliances would go to shit 6 ways to Sunday. He had told Anna that there was a possibility that Senna wasn't his first daughter because of his intimate relationship with Hanami, and she had accepted it, saying that he was human then, and his humanity pushed him to developing a lasting connection to something in the world that wasn't his sister's or his father. He sighed and ran his hand through his blonde hair, stopping to look at himself in the window. He laughed at what he saw. I need sunlight. Shaking his head, he continued on his way to his study, which was basically the entire east wing of the castle. Ichigo had really gone all out to pander to his research side when constructing the castle. The east wing was the science and research wing, and it was where Kisuke, alongside Akuja, created the evil pieces. The west wing was previously the residential wing, before being converted into a library. The unused north wing was converted into the residential area, with all the servants and guards moving in quickly. The south wing, which overlooked the realm of hell and had a nice view of New Lilith, was the king's wing. It's where Ichigo, Anna, Senna and himself slept. It also held the guest quarters, which were used frequently by Surziches and Grafia, who brought little Rias to play with Senna. Sometimes they would be accompanied by Serafo, who would bring Sona to play. Needless to say, the three of them would get up to all kinds of mischief and quickly became the bestest of friends. The central tower was the transport room, where Ichigo would go if he needed to get to New Lilith quickly to discuss matters with the four Mau. Below the central tower was the throne room, which ran the length of the castle and allowed quick access to each of the wings. The castle itself was 9 floors, each representing a layer of hell. It was the previous castle that Lucifer resided in before the Great War. It was aptly named Folan's Cradle. Of course, Ichigo didn't like the name, so he changed it to Horizon's Reach. He was quite proud of himself after it was chosen by the guards and servants, who all put in suggestions for names into a hat. Once again, Kisuke found himself reminiscing and shook his head to clear his thoughts and looked down at his watch. Frowning, he realized that he had literally spent something close to 10 minutes thinking about the origins of the castle. Deciding that he could write the letters tomorrow, he moved away from the east wing and moved in the direction of the south wing. It didn't take him long to reach his room. Sighing and opening the door, he froze when a familiar Ryatsu washed over him. His eyes went wide and his heart began to race. Sweat started to form on his brow. It can't be she, impossible it's her. For Kisuke, coherent thought became a difficult thing. He stumbled through the short corridor, bumping into every piece of furniture along the way. He was pretty sure that he tripped once and had to support himself using the small table that held the photo of him and Yoruichi with Ichigo the day he went to Soul Society to save Rukia. He stuck his head around the corner to be able to see into the room, only to be scratched quite viciously across the face. Of course it did nothing to him, training for 1500 years with Ichigo would increase your power quite a bit it seems, other than give him a slight tickle. His lack of reaction made the second occupant of the room quite annoyed. DCH. It sucked when I didn't get anything out of Ichigo, but you too. That's not fair. Kisuke looked down and scooped up the small black cat into his arms before falling to his knees, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. Yoruichi the black cat froze before relaxing and exploding in a puff of smoke, revealing a very macho-skinned woman who threw her arms around the blonde man's shoulders, pulling him close to her. Kisuke. The two conversed late into the night, with Kisuke doing most of the talking. Of course, Yoruichi told him about how Ichigo found her, and it made the former shopkeeper smile. Even after 1,000 years, Ichigo never stopped looking. Kisuke listened as Yoruichi told him the story. So, there I was, facing off against a very, very big dragon. I think Tannen was his name. Anyway, he charges down, shouting that I invaded his territory and it was his duty to remove me. I honestly didn't know where I was, so I fought back. I changed form and lashed out, only to find out I was very, very weak. I had my full power, but this guy was a monster. That was until he was slammed into the floor and flung into a mountain. She broke out into laughter when she remembered the face the dragon made when he stopped mid-flight and dropped like a sack of potatoes. Kisuke himself laughed when she dropped her fist into her palm to emphasize the impact the dragon made. She looked back at Kisuke. The dragon then pulled itself free from the mountain and charged right at the person who threw it, only to stop and start sweating. I was curious, so I shifted back into my cat form and got closer. All I could see was the dragon prostrating before 3 people. One of them had red hair, like Renji. The other was a small woman, about the size of Rukia, maybe a little taller. The third was tall, a black tight-fitting cloak that had 3 coattails which fluttered in the wind. He had long, black hair and crimson eyes. His face looked really familiar, but I couldn't place it. Kisuke gave her a blank look. Yoru. That person, the third one, you know him. I've been helping him all this time. He's actually the one that owns this castle. She gave him a quizzical glance. Yeah right. Oh well, I guess I'll meet him tomorrow. The red-haired guy said that I was to wait for you here, then he left. What do we do now? Kisuke lay back on his bed. We wait until tomorrow. The king wanted to see me. This got Yoruichi's attention. The king? As in the king of souls. What did you do this time? Kisuke actually laughed, which surprised her even more because Kisuke was never one to laugh so openly. Nah, the king of hell. Yoruichi froze. She couldn't really see him, but she could easily recognize the black hair and the crimson eyes. What really surprised her was the recognition in his eyes. In all, he looked like he had just seen someone come back from the dead. Kisuke, who was beside her, pinched her arm gently, bringing her back to reality. Hey Yoru. Say something. That's the king of hell. He's in charge of this entire castle. He graciously lent me that room when I told him I was a researcher. Come on Yoru. Don't leave me hanging. The woman coughed and spluttered a little before regaining her composure and walked up to the base of the stairs that lead to the throne the black-haired man was sitting on, a violet-haired woman sitting on an identical throne to his immediate right. They were both looking at her curiously and the man raised an eyebrow when she knelt before him. My king. I thank you for rescuing me from the depths of hell. I humbly beg for your approval to let me stay here with Kisuke. He and I have been apart for I don't know how long. I remember waking up here and then being attacked by that dragon. I swear to you. I offer you my services as a former captain of Soul Society, if that is what you desire of me. The room was quiet, then everything went horribly wrong. Yoruichi heard a snicker, before the snicker turned into giggles that were trying to be restrained. She looked up and saw the violet-haired woman with a hand to her mouth. She heard the same thing from behind her, and she turned to see Kisuke in the same position, except he had his stupid fan covering his face. She turned back to face the black-haired man, but was shocked to see that he had moved and was standing in front of her, his hand held out before her. Come on. You're better than that, Yoruichi. She frowned before taking the hand and standing. She watched as Kisuke strolled up next to him and whispered in his ear. She saw the black-haired man make an O with his mouth before laughing slightly. He turned back to face her. Let me introduce myself properly. Last time, when we were at the crags, you ran away before I could talk to you, so I had Surziches and Seraphil bring you here. It is it to see you again, Yoruichi Shihoin. I am the king of hell, and my name is Shiba Ichigo. Yoruichi fainted, much to the humor of both Kisuke and Ichigo. She swore to herself as her consciousness faded that she would get strong enough to gouge their eyes out. She drifted back into consciousness as she felt the cool sheets draped over her shift slightly. She groaned before attempting to sit up. She opened her eyes only to find herself staring into a pair of very large amber eyes that were filled with wonder. She heard soft laughter coming from the corner of the room, and when her eyesight settled, she saw Ichigo sitting in a chair, a book resting on his lap. He stood and walked over, his eyes soft and warm. "Yoruichi. I know that it seems strange to hear that I'm Ichigo. But I'm serious, I am Kurosaki Ichigo. The same one you trained. The same one who invaded Soul Society and Hueco Mundo, and the same one who used Mujutsu to defeat Sasuke. Trust me, Yoruichi, it really irk." He was stopped mid-sentence when Yoruichi threw her arms around him, tears spilling from her eyes. "Ichigo. It really is you. Ichigo." He wrapped his own arms around the woman and held her close. He could feel her tears soaking into his shoulder. He raised his hand and gently ran his fingers through her hair. "SHH. Hey, Yoruichi, there are some people I want to introduce you to. Can you be strong for a little bit?" He got a nod into his shoulder as a response. He chuckled when she didn't let go. "Hey, come on now. A couple minutes more. You smell different. I want to remember it from now on as your smell." He chuckled some more. She let go of him after a little, using the back of her hand to wipe her tears away. He wiped a stray tear with a thumb. "Atta girl." She raised an eyebrow. "Hey, last time I checked, you were the child. What makes you think you can treat me like one?" She poked him in the chest. He gave her a sad smile and sat down on the bed next to her, Senna jumping onto the end of the bed and sitting cross-legged. "Yoru, this is Senna, my daughter. She's gonna be 13 this year. Senna, this is your Aunt Yoruichi." The child turned to face her, her large eyes glistening. "My aunt? Awesome. Hi, I'm Shiba Senna, nice to meet ya." She skipped over and jumped into her arms. She instantly took a liking to the matcha-skinned woman. And the same went for Yoruichi as she wrapped her arms around the child. "Hey. How's it going, kid? Chill here for a bit." The young woman nodded before shuffling around and settled down on her lap. Yoruichi began to play with her violet hair. "Hey, her hair color looks just like that woman's hair from the throne room. Did little Ichi finally become a man?" She wriggled her eyebrows suggestively, to which Ichigo winked. "Not in front, Senna." She coughed at his response, her eyes wide. "Since when did he learn? This will be fun." She compassed herself before going back to playing with Senna's hair. "Is she this one's mother?" Ichigo nodded. "Yeah, Anna. She and I met a very long time ago, Yoruichi. A very long time ago." He paused before facing her, his entire posture radiated sadness, pain and suffering. "We met about 1,000 years ago, Yoruichi." Now, Yoruichi thought herself to be compassed and proper most of the time, but she thought she might have had a heart attack at this point. She wrapped her arms around the child in front of her. 1,000 years, Ichigo, are you kidding me? You've been in hell for 1,000 years, don't play games with me." He raised his hands in an attempt to placate her. 1,500 years actually. "But let me tell you what happened. After I defeated Sasuke using Mujutsu, instead of taking my powers, the final Jutsuga Tensho slowly began to drain my life away. I was dying. Gochin decided to stay away, thinking that I was powerless, and the people I called friends moved away as well, even Soul Society kept from me. So I left, as you know. I ended up in Kyoto, where I met Hanami. Actually, I saved her life from some loyalists to Tamamo no Mae. Anyway, she told me that deep inside my soul, there was something that was actually trying to negate the effects of the final Jutsuga, and that she was willing to help me bring forth that power. So I stayed in Kyoto for about 15 years, where I manifested the power hell lent me when Yuzu was brought here by Shuren. Now, it took almost 15 years of trying and meditating to bring out this power, but as soon as I did, I was brought to hell. Kisuke heard from Hanami that I vanished in a burst of flame, and he came down to see if I was here. Of course he found me, and it turned out I couldn't go back because hell finally had a claim on my soul. So I was stuck here, have been ever since. Oh, we need to talk about some adult stuff. Stram. Could you take Senna to Anna? She wanted to prepare for the trip to Kyoto. Thanks. Yoruichi, the guard that entered, could be compared to the old man in Soul Society, and the power he gave off could easily rival the fossil. Of course, my king. Come now, young miss. He held his hand out, and Senna spun, Ed Yoruichi on the, giggled like an adorable child and hopped off the bed, taking the guard's hand. "See ya, Aunt Yoruichi, later dad." She skipped off, closely following the guard, and said a joke which caused the guard to laugh, which could be heard echoing down the halls, and it quickly became infectious, with other people joining in. Ichigo turned to Yoruichi. "What do you know about Hanami? I know you stayed with her after I left. There is something I need to know. Something I need to prepare myself for." Yoruichi cocked her head to the side. "Geez, Ichigo, it's been over 1,000 years, and the first thing you do is talk business. Fine. I shall humor you. A male Kyuubi no Kitsune arrived about a year after you left. He courted Hanami for about 100 years as she was intent on you returning. She gave up and gave in to him, and she gave birth to his child 400 years after that. Isaka was her name, and she is about 350, maybe 400 herself at this point, with her own child. Why? Ichigo let out a sigh, and Yoruichi could basically feel the relief in his reiatsu. Ichigo, you didn't sleep with her, did you? He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, a couple night before I was brought down to hell. We shared a bed. I thought perhaps Usaka could have been my daughter. The timing was all there, and I was seriously worried. Yoruichi was fuming. I sent you to Hanami so you could live a peaceful life. And you slept with her. Ichigo. She smacked him on the back of his head, to which he barely flinched. Why are you so strong? She threw her hands up in the air and she dropped back into the pillows. He just laughed. Yoruichi. Kisuke is about as strong as me. I've been here longer than him. He left the world of the living shortly after Central went crazy. You should have seen the state we left Soul Society in. She turned to face him. What? Did you do? She punctuated each word with a brief pulse of reiatsu. Invaded. Took some names. Toppled the government. Nothing too serious. She punched him in the face. Surprisingly, he felt it. He dropped to his knees, his hands shooting up, and began massaging his sore nose. It may have actually been broken. Are you a fool scratch that I need you and Kisuke here for what I'm about to do? Kisuke. Get in here, you bastard. Not even a second passed before the eccentric shopkeeper appeared by the window. The first thing he saw was Ichigo clutching his nose, and he instantly knew what happened. He turned to face Yoruichi and saw that she was absolutely furious. Yoruichi-san. Shunko. Ooh. Anna felt the castle shake, and the dying echo of a scream reverberated throughout the halls. Every guard looked around curiously before returning to their normal duties. Senna frowned and looked at her mother. Hey mom. Dad and Uncle Kisuke, are they going to be alright? I mean, Aunt Yoruichi seems quite angry. Upset. Enraged. There are so many emotions pouring out of her right now. Anna giggled at the question, earning a raised eyebrow from her daughter. Don't worry about them, Senna. Your father and uncle made her very angry by doing something really silly a long time ago. They are however going to fine, as they can most definitely take what your aunt is throwing at them. Remember what happened with Tiamat? She smiled at the beaming grin that Senna gave her. That's right. Dad made Aunt Tiamat into his familiar. And Aunt Tiamat is a dragon. Admittedly, Aunt Tiamat tried to eat him first. She nodded and crossed her arms. Anna looked at her out of the corner of her eye, pride surging up from her heart at seeing her daughter growing up, maturing into a beautiful young woman as every day went by. She smiled as her amber eyes reflected the sunlight. She was surprised when Senna was born with violet hair and amber eyes which were actually a mix of her yellow and Ichigo's crimson. She remembered when he took her in his arms and said a name that she thought was perfect. Flashback. The cries of the newborn child rung out through the halls. Ichigo, who had been pacing back and forth on the same spot for about 4 hours, froze. He slowly turned to the door that was the only thing keeping him from his wife and his newborn child. He turned back to face the other people who were waiting with him. Surziches, who had arrived with Grafia, who immediately went to help Anna with the delivery. Serafol was there, standing next to the Crimson Lucifer. So was Akuja, Falbium and Kisuke. They all gave him a look that was a mix between pride and surprise. Surziches walked up to him and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Congratulations, Ichigo. I can feel the little one's power from here. She will be a beacon to both our races. A true light in the darkness of hell. Serafol clapped happily whilst the others cheered. Ichigo felt like crying, and he completely missed what Surziches said about the gender of his child. He spun back the other way when the door opened, revealing a very tired and disheveled Grafia. Ichigo-sama. She is asking for you. He nodded and stood to his full height, trying to hide every semblance of giddiness he could. He took 2 paces before forgetting all semblance of control and vanished in a burst of shunpo, startled yelps from inside the room, the indicator that he materialized next to his wife. Anna. He looked down at the tired visage of his wife. The woman who had spent her life fixing him and the one who actually succeeded. He pulled up a chair and sat down by her bedside, taking her hand in his own. Ichigo. She turned her head to look at him, her yellow eyes filled with motherly warmth, love and affection. A cough broke their gazes, and they turned to look at Grafia, who was carrying a small pink bundle in her arms. He looked at Grafia, then back at the bundle. A chuckle from the door made him look that way, to where Kisuke stood, an ever-present pillar in his life. A man who faced down demigods, gods, myths, legends and the mother of storms, Tiamat herself, trembling at the sight of a babe. This will be the most comedic part of your memoirs to date. He whipped out his fan and narrowly dodged a scalpel that flew at his head, courtesy of Ichigo. Why are you even writing that thing anyway? Tia tried to eat me. Of course I had to fight back. He gave up when Kisuke lifted his fan once again, hiding his smirk. Sighing, he looked back at Grafia, who moved closer to him once his little episode with Kisuke had finished. She gently passed the small pink bundle to Anna, who eagerly took her child into her arms. "Mama has you. Mama is here." She sweetly cooed to the child, who slowly began to calm down. Ichigo stood and moved ever so slightly away when the little one began to cry. He looked at Anna with a look of confusion. She beckoned him over, and when he did close the gap, the little one calmed down. He smiled at her. Anna at the child on the forehead. "Do you want to go to Papa? Here you go. Gently now, there we go." She passed the child over to Ichigo, who, thanks to all the time he spent in the clinic with his father, took her properly in his arms. He looked down at her. "Our daughter. Anna, what will we call her?" He had her nose gently and chuckled gently when she wrinkled her little nose. It was at that moment when her eyes fluttered open, revealing two amber orbs looking back at him. Ichigo sat next to Anna, and the woman smiled when the child looked at her curiously. "Senna. Her name is Senna." Anna looked at Ichigo, who spoke without taking his eyes off his daughter. "What a beautiful name. I love it. Welcome to the world, Senna." Ichigo at her nose once again, before standing and walking over to Kisuke. "Kisuke. Would you do us tea?" Ichigo. "Of course. This humble shopkeeper accepts." "Thank you, Ichigo. If anything should ever befall you, I will do everything in my power to make sure that she lives a long, happy life. That is the duty handed to me now, as her godfather. Thank you, Ichigo. Also, it is now my job to spoil her rotten, and that is exactly what I will do. So if you will excuse me, I have presents I must finish building and testing." He bent down and gently edged Senna on the forehead, the small girl letting out a little giggle. Kisuke opened the door and looked back at Ichigo, who in turn looked back at Anna. "Oh. I think I'll take a minute to recover. You try pushing out a baby." He chuckled and nodded. "I love you, Shiba Anna." "And I you, Kurosaki Ichigo." Flashback end. Anna had finished packing when there was a knock at the door. Curiously, she opened it when she didn't feel any familiar power from behind it. She ushered Senna behind her and gathered magic energy in her hand. She slowly opened the door to reveal Tiamat, who was leaning on the opposite wall, her face in a serious tone. She was angry about something, and her sky-blue eyes looked like a thunderstorm was brewing in them. She pushed her white hair behind her ear and looked up at Anna, who was smiling brightly. "Tia. When did you get home?" "Lady Anna, I just got back not 10 minutes ago. I've come to let you know that there is a guest waiting in the throne room. I can't find Master anywhere, so I came to let you know. I am his familiar, but I cannot sense him. Is everything okay, Lady Anna?" Anna smiled. "Oh, he is fine. He and Kisuke both are catching up, to put it simply, with an old friend that was found in the outskirts of Tennin's territory." He roughed her up a little, but Ichigo intervened quickly enough. "Come in, Senna missed you dearly." She stood aside and let the violet-haired bullet jump out from behind her into the waiting arms of the Mother of Storms. "Little one. How are you? Have you been behaving?" Anna smiled. Tiamat always had a soft spot for Senna. Ever since she was born, she always kept a silent vigil over her while she slept. Ichigo and her were comfortable leaving the castle because they knew both Tiamat and Stram were there. Stram, as it turned out, was strong enough to fight on par with both Seraphol and Falbium. It also turned out that Surziches and Akuja were basically power-inhabiting devil skins. She closed her eyes and sent Ichigo a mental message through their bond. She received a confirmation almost immediately. "I'll meet you and Tia at the throne room. Yoruichi just finished venting at us. Admittedly, she got us good at some points, and I think she broke my nose multiple times. I just fixed it again, so don't worry. See you soon." She laughed, which caused both Senna and Tiamat to look at her funny. "Ichigo will meet you, Tia, and I in the throne room. He is on his way there now, and I bet he will beat us there if we dally around. Stram. Please take Senna and keep her company. It is time for the king to greet his guest." Stram appeared out of nowhere and nodded. He turned to Tiamat and gave her a smile. "Lady Tiamat. Welcome home. How was your mission?" Tiamat nodded. "It went well. Crom Crouch won't be bothering the Quetzalcoatl anymore. That means the Mesoamerican gods will sympathetic to the mass want for peace." The knight captain nodded. "The more, the better. These old bones have seen too much war. I was there with the king and queen during the Great War. Those were times to say the least. The king truly was a monster on the battlefield. I'm pretty sure that he was the reason so many high-ranking angels fell that day. I heard he almost made Lady Gabriel fall." Anna laughed. "Oh yes. I remember that fight. Gab was getting so frustrated with not being able to catch him that she was on the verge of letting her anger and rage take over. Of course, Ichigo noticed and knocked her out before she could fall, saying that heaven shouldn't lose their strongest woman. That was war though. And don't forget the Civil War. Senna, your father and I will tell you all about it when you turn 15, so off you go, young lady." The young woman pouted but agreed. When she was younger, she asked them about the wars, but they refused to tell her because she was too young. They told her that they most definitely will tell her, just not yet. They asked her to wait until she was 15 and properly along in her training. She agreed, thinking that she could get some info out of them early, but was hugely mistaken when they kept avoiding her attempts to squeeze information out of them. They did, however, reward her with small pieces here and there when she used a creative method or ingenious plan to try and get something. When she asked, her father said that she was using her mind and that it was the strongest muscle she had, and when she used it to create plans or progress in her studies, she would be rewarded for doing good work. Alright then. I'll see you later then, Mom. Say hi to Dad for me. She waved her goodbyes before heading off with Stram, saying that she had a couple more things to pack before the trip and that they should head to her room as quickly as possible. Smiling, Anna turned to Tiamat. Let's go, Tia. Of course, my queen. Ichigo sat on the throne. His eyes set on the person standing below him, sword drawn and eyes full of hate. Standing slowly, he waved off the concerned looks from both Anna and Tiamat, who had arrived in time to see the stranger draw his sword. He calmly walked down the steps until he stood before the man. They stared deep into each other's eyes, then, as quick as a flash, the unnamed man snapped his wrist, the sword arcing towards Ichigo's neck. Moving equally as fast, Ichigo snapped his own hand towards the blade, catching it on a finger, eyes not moving from the other man's. Enough. He basically commanded, which seemed to anger the other. You dare presume to command me? The last time you commanded me ended with me killing you. What makes you think that you can do so now? Ichigo narrowed his eyes dangerously. I can do so now because you, Dumbus, are in my home. Lower your sword. Now. The only way I will lower my sword is if you tear my arm from its socket or remove my head from my shoulders. I will not lower it of my own free will, Kurosaki Ichigo. He applied more force onto the sword, which was still stopped by Ichigo's finger. Then I shall take your arm, Ukaiora Schiffer. Without moving, the pale man's arm was violently torn apart, shock appearing on his face as the pain registered. I didn't even see him move. He whipped out his other hand, grabbing onto the bloody limb that was dropping to the ground, pressing the severed limb to the stump that was his shoulder. A white substance bubbled and the limb reattached itself. Thinking quickly, Ukaiora jumped back, flipping a good distance, charging a green zero as he did so. Landing halfway down the room, he raised his finger and launched the blast at Ichigo, who simply flicked his head to the side, and the attack lurched harmlessly to the side, crashing through the wall and detonating in the distance. Using the precise moment when Ichigo flicked his head, Ukaiora charged in again, a vain attempt to bring the confrontation back to close quarters. Noticing the idea, Ichigo sidestepped the incoming slash before lashing out with his foot, burying his heel into his attacker's stomach. The move resulted in Ukaiora coughing up blood and spittle before being launched towards the castle entrance, crashing through the large wooden doors. He tumbled head over heels, carving a trench with his body. He came to rest when a hand gripped his shoulder and he looked up to see someone he didn't expect to see. Woman. What are you doing? This is obviously not an opponent you can take alone. I told you. Taking on the King of Hell alone would be suicidal. Don't be stupid, Ukaiora, with me here, we can't lose. After all, my blood can withstand almost anything. The woman helped him to his feet and as he stood, he could feel his regeneration repairing all the damage done to him, bones cracking and setting themselves, and his lungs inflating after being punctured by his own ribs. He coughed up some more blood but wiped it away and held his sword forwards. Enclose, Murcielago. He exploded in a burst of Reiatsu, the green power flooding over everyone present, affecting people who were weaker than him. What he didn't notice though was that the only people affected were the gardeners. Ichigo stepped out through the broken doors, his eyes landing on the woman standing next to the now released Ukaiora. He sighed. One more doesn't change anything. I will show you exactly how large the difference in power really is. He vanished and the woman gasped at the sheer speed he showed, getting past both their guards and planting his open palms into both their stomachs, launching them at the wall that surrounded the castle. She coughed up some blood and wiped it away with the back of her hand, a smirk finding its way to her mouth. Damn. This guy really is strong. He really deserves the title of King of Hell. Come on, Ukaiora, let's step this up. I bet he doesn't even have a release. She held her hand up in front of her. Quincy. Bulstandig. She was bathed in a pillar of blue energy, while Ukaiora closed his eyes and shrouded himself in power. Resurrection. Segunda etapa. He stood in his fully released form and Ichigo just smirked. This again. I'm much stronger than before. Don't think that with this form you will show me true despair. He blurred and appeared in front of him, startling him again, and punched him in the face, launching him through the wall. Ichigo looked to his left and reached up with his right hand, still outstretched from punching Ukaiora, and caught the arrow that was aimed at his head. Peleg feel, huh? Pathetic. Do you honestly think that this has enough power to even hurt me? He launched the arrow back at the shooter, who had to quickly dodge using hearing kyaku. She had to dodge again when a blast of magical energy tore the spot she landed in apart. She noticed something that shocked her though. That was Kido. She jumped back and pulled on her bow, charging a massive amount of energy into it. Ichigo chuckled. Bring it on. You too, Ulquiorra. I'll take you both on. Said a ranker appeared by her side, a flaming green javelin in his hand. Together now. Licked regen. Lanza del Relampago. But both techniques named, they screamed towards Ichigo, who didn't move an inch. He looked up at the final moment and he clicked his fingers. The Kudo number 80. Denku. A white wall appeared and spilt the distance between him and the two attacks, which crashed into the wall and exploded spectacularly. Ulquiorra and his accomplice were barely able to hold their ground as the concussive wave from the collision hit them. Then, everything went dark as the smoke and debris rained down from the sky. Told you. Pathetic. They both spun around, and through the smoke, a pair of shining crimson eyes stared back at them. Jitsuga. Tensho. They didn't even see the attack coming before it crashed into them and launched them back through the wall they were initially launched through, straight through the doors that Ulquiorra was sent through, and crash landed at the base of the stairs that led to the throne. Coughing up blood, the woman turned to check on her companion and cursed when she saw that he was knocked out of his segunda etapa and his sealed sword was stuck into the ground a fair distance away. She clutched at the wound that the King of Hell inflicted on her with that attack, blood slowly oozing from the cut across her ribs. She coughed up blood and applied pressure to the wound. An evil chuckle caught her attention and she turned to face the throne, only to see the King of Hell sitting back in the throne, his crimson eyes crushing every resistance she had in place. She grit her teeth and coughed up some more blood. She turned to look at Ulquiorra again and cried out in shock when the king waved his hand and launched Ulquiorra at the wall, his body slamming into it and falling lifelessly to the ground. Soft groans were all that told her that he was still alive. She needed to get him out, and fast. If you think you can get away and get him some medical assistance, then you are sorely mistaken. You invade my home, threaten me, and attack me. That alone means you must face retribution for your crimes. I will only ask each question once. If you don't answer, then I will take a finger. Once you run out of fingers, I'll start taking toes. Then your nose. Then your teeth. Then your ribs, then each and every single one of your bones. Slowly. Painfully. And you won't pass out, you won't die. I will keep you alive until you willingly answer each and every one of my questions. Understand? She could only nod, no longer capable of meeting his eyes. Good. Now. What is your name? I know his is Ulquiorra Schiffer. But you. You are an interesting one. A Quincy in hell. The destruction of souls is a serious crime, Quincy. So, your name. She took a deep breath. My name is Kurosaki Masaki. And I am a high-ranking member of Chaos Brigade. She looked up and was shocked to see the flabbergasted face of the king staring down at her. It was this expression that let her find some form of resistance. What? Cat got your tongue? A sharp rap to the back of her head made her flinch and spin to face her attacker, only to find herself staring into a pain of golden eyes. Yoruichi. Wait, what? What is going on? What are you doing in hell? Answers, please. She struggled to stand, but a hand from the matcha-skinned woman made her drop back to the floor. Masaki. Don't tell me you don't recognize him. Masaki frowned before she followed the line of sight of her old friend and frowned when she was looking at the King of Hell. Am I supposed to? Yes, Masaki, you are supposed to. Has it been so long that you have forgotten? Have you really fallen so low as to join Chaos Brigade? You, a proud Quincy, working with an Aranker. All in order to kill the King of Hell. Masaki was seriously lost. She knew the King of Hell. How? When? She turned back to face him and stared intently at him when something suddenly clicked in the back of her head, someone she hadn't thought of in a very long time. Listen? Yoruichi laughed. Blows, but no cigar. Then, it happened. Her eyes went wide and her heart rate skyrocketed. Sweat started to form on her brow and her hands began to feel all clammy. All the saliva from her mouth dried up and tears started to form in her eyes. Her breathing changed from calm to quick ragged gasps and a blinding pain erupted from the back of her skull as long-buried memories surfaced. Ichigo? 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 Ichigo. She forced herself to her feet, long forgetting the fact that she was wounded, and dragged herself up the short flight of steps, and the king dropped to his knees, his long arms finding her arms. Within a second, she was in his embrace, her own arms wrapping around his neck, her tears and his falling freely, as long, pent-up pain finally surfaced. Ichigo had a nagging sense that his mother was in hell. Ever since he found out that Quincy went to hell for the destruction of souls, he had been searching for a while, but never found her. That didn't stop him though, and he kept on looking. And now, finally, he had her back in his arms. Admittedly, he didn't expect her to charge into his home and fight him, destroying a fair chunk of his recently renovated gardens. But none of that mattered now. He buried his head into her shoulder and only managed to choke out one word. But that word had the potential to change his entire destiny. Mom. Yoruichi paled when she realized that they may actually never end up catching Ichigo if Kisuke had properly trained him on stealth force techniques. He sighed and pulled out her phone. She turned to walk away when she heard a giggle. Turning, she saw Senna trying not to laugh. Thought I got him that time. I never took my eyes off him and he still managed to change the ribbon for the letter. But how did he know beforehand that I would be going through his pockets looking for the ribbon? She put her finger on her chin and went into thought. Yoruichi watched on silently, curious to the answer herself. Ah. The walls. Senna cried out and scowled. Dad can hear things through the walls of the castle. He can hear everything that goes on. He must have heard you whisper to me to check his pockets. Senna grumbled silently as she walked off. Even though she was mad at her father for using such a cheap trick, she was madder at herself for forgetting about his connection in the first place. Yoruichi cursed silently and flashed away, hoping to get a ribbon back before the day was done. She didn't get a ribbon back. The day had ended with her cornering Ichigo in the throne room, Shunko exploding around her frame, eyes full of burning fury. She charged at him, hoping to catch him off guard with her reckless charge. However, the glint in his eye made her think twice, and before she knew it, she was on her back, Ichigo standing above her, crimson eyes twinkling in delight. She was about to lash out with a kick when the castle clock sounded, ringing through the halls. She froze in place, Ichigo laughing. He held a hand out which she graciously used to pull herself back up, glaring at him the entire time. Damn it, Ichigo, you cheated. You're about 100 times stronger than ever. How was I supposed to catch you? She huffed and pouted, making Ichigo laugh. Calm down, I enjoyed our little chase, and there is no way I'm going to force you to do something so embarrassing. Here. He gave her the ribbon, which she immediately used to tie her hair up. Just do it once, for me, right here, right now. And we shall call it even. I'm going to get Kukaku and the others here tomorrow. Then we are going to Soul Society the day after. He walked back to his throne and dropped into it. Yoruichi walked over and sat on the armrest, leaned down and whispered into his ear. NNNYAA, and Ichigo nodded and looked up at her face crimson even with her dark skin, and he laughed, but not in a cruel manner. Thanks, just made my day 10 times better. I appreciate it, Yoruichi. Now go get some rest. Big day ahead of us, there is a lot we have to talk about as well. Including the impending invasion. Yoruichi stared at Ichigo with wide eyes. What invasion? Who's getting invaded? When? Soul Society. I have been looking into some disturbing occurrences. There are thousands of souls vanishing from Rukongai. There is only one group of people capable of erasing souls from existence. The Quincy. Therefore, I believe that they are going to be invading Soul Society soon enough. Which has been dormant for too long, and the Kaiser Jesang indicates that he will be awakening soon. Now go, I'm sure Kisuke would like your company. He leaned back into his throne and closed his eyes, his power pulsing out in steady waves. Soon enough, the King of Hell drifted off into slumber. Yoruichi brushed his hair away from his face and hit him gently on the dot. Now that could cause some problems, Yoruichi Dono. The woman spun and found herself looking into the blue eyes of a silver-haired woman. Usually Ana-sama watches him while he sleeps, but it falls to me tonight, seeing as how the little one took up residence in her bed. We have never been introduced right. My name is Tiamat, and I am Ichigo-sama's familiar. Tiamat bowed, giving Yoruichi a chill down her spine. She hadn't even sensed the woman arriving, nor could she feel her presence in the room. He is mine, Tiamat-san. I ask, how did someone like you becomes this guy's familiar? Aren't you supposed to be as stronger than your familiar? Tiamat chuckled. Ichigo-sama ventured into the familiar forest about 700 years ago. At the time he was accompanied by Knight Captain Fausand and Lady Anna. They were supposed to be testing the Knight Captain for his strength, and I caught whiff of Ichigo-sama's power. I ventured out to confront him, and he ended up breaking my scales and pinned me to the ground with sheer strength alone. Surzich's Dono and Akuja Dono arrived and decided to test the Knight Captain anyway. It seems that the old knight possessed powers that could rival, if not surpass, your Squad Zero. Yoruichi blanched. The Knight Captain possesses such power. Incredible. If he were to join us in assisting the Shinigami against the Quincy, then it would be an easy victory. Tiamat shook her head. Unfortunately, the Knight Captain cannot leave Hell. If you wish to know more, then asking him would be prudent. I have already spoken too much. Please, retire to your quarters and get some rest. I shall watch him during his slumber. Yoruichi nodded, but spun as she reached the door. Why doesn't he sleep with his wife? Ichigo-sama, he cannot. The little one was born through an amalgamation of power performed through a very dangerous ritual. I have been permitted to speak of this, but it is a cruel tale. Please. If you wish to know, then are you prepared to change your opinion of the young king? Yoruichi nodded. The king was dying. He had taken a bolt of energy straight through the heart, fired by a holy weapon, one I now possess. That weapon is capable of rivaling even the true Longinus. Its name is Rongaminiad, once possessed by the Queen of Knights Arturia Pendragon. How it ended up in the hands of the old Mau faction is something we don't know. Anyway, I digress. The ritual was called the Suffering and the Torment. Lady Anna proposed the ritual, and Ichigo-sama agreed, much to everyone's shock and horror. It was supposed to be that one transfers the holy energy from one host to another, killing the second host instantly. However, the holy energy got mixed into Ichigo-sama's Quincy power, and when it was transferred into Lady Anna, who had already experienced dual relations with Ichigo-sama, it instead formed a fetus within her. It may have been that she was already with child, but instead of killing Lady Anna, that holy energy was turned into a child. Which was the little one Senna. The little one is like Ichigo-sama, a hybrid. However, where Ichigo-sama is hollow, Shinigami and Quincy, the little one is Shinigami, Quincy, angel and devil. There is a strong chance that she will be a much more powerful ruler than Ichigo-sama. We just hope that the little one retains her parents' love for existence. Ah. It is much later than I originally planned. Yoruichi Dono. We have been talking for over 3 hours. Please go get some rest. I shall wake you in the morning. Please be clothed and make sure that Kisuke is too. Yoruichi coughed slightly before moving back to the door. I can't make you a promise and I can't speak for Kisuke either. She left quietly, leaving Tiamat to watch over Ichigo. Thea, why didn't you tell her the truth? Why use that story again? Tiamat looked up at the throne and saw Ichigo looking down at her. How? How could I? What was I supposed to say? That you lost your mind to the torment of hell, and your hollow powers exploded in a violent fit of rage and carnal, and you forced yourself on your wife. Ichigo sighed. It's the truth, Tia. That's all there is to it. My lord, please forgive me, but I beg to differ. What happened then was not in your control. It was Tiamat. His voice alone forced her to her knees. He was by her side in an instant. I'm sorry. I'm tired of lying to everyone. Forgive me. Do not dwell on it, my young king. I spoke out line. Forgive me instead for spinning that tale once again. I could never blame you, Tia. Never. He cupped her with his hand and gently helped her up. Go back to sleep, my king. There is a war ahead of us. Nai-sama. Why are we being called to Horizon's Reach? Did you actually manage to piss of the king of hell this time? Kukaku walked behind Kain, who was sweating bullets. Ganju walked behind the two of them, sweating like a pig over a roast. I don't know, sis. I was there when the messenger arrived with the summons for all of us to head towards the castle immediately. Guess we will fin look out. He stopped abruptly and pushed his family back as the giant doors that loomed before them exploded outwards. The black-clad figure shot out and crashed next to them, bouncing multiple times before coming to rest by being embedded into the rocks that lines the path to castle. Ow. Anawai. They heard the voice coming from the rubble and backed off slightly. They turned towards the open gate to see a woman storm through, eyes full of fury. Because I feel like it. I haven't had a good fight in a long time. Come. Shiba Ichigo. Fight me. She rocketed past them, a cruel smile on her face as she lunged at Ichigo. They clashed blades and went flying off into the distance. Ganju spoke up. Did she just say Shiba Ichigo? They both nodded. Kain then burst out into laughter. Ahahaha, Shiba rules hell. That's hilarious. Kukaku just grabbed his collar and dragged him into the castle grounds, Ganju following behind quietly. They reached the doors, what was left of them anyway, that lead into the throne room, and threw her brother inside. Following behind, Ganju looked back. Was that really Ichigo? How? He was supposed to be dead. He shook his head and went onwards, hoping that in the castle, he could find his answers, not only for him, but for his family as a whole. Soon enough, they happened upon an old guard wearing some slightly more decorative armor than the rest of the guards, and Kain, who had regained his composure, spoke up. Hi, we were summoned by the King of Hell to Horizon's Reach. We are the Shiba family. My name is Kain, this is Kukaku, and that is Ganju. The guard looked at them. Kisuke Dono was correct in saying that you look alike. Especially the black hair. Come, follow me. My name is Stramfausend, I am the Knight Captain of the King's Guard. Welcome to Horizon's Reach. He beckoned them to follow, taking them to the throne. Wait here for a bit, I'll go get someone who you're supposed to be familiar with. Ah. Don't worry about the king. He is currently preoccupied dealing with the changes his wife is going through. Ah, this place is sure going to get lively again, another little one on the way. He walked off, whistling a happy tune, his spear thrown over his shoulder in a calm and relaxed fashion. Kukaku tapped her brother on the shoulder. I could probably take him. Think you can? Kane hummed. Probably. Doesn't seem that strong, maybe a low captain level. That's the Kingsguard captain. Thought they'd have someone stronger. He shook his head and Kukaku hummed in agreement. Neither of you can take Stram. That man is a monster. They all spun at the sound of a familiar voice and they came face to face with the cat. He's about as strong as the Leviathan herself. They all blanched. He's got most of his power sealed away for occasions like this, doesn't really like showing his power off. He knows how strong he is and that is enough for him. Kukaku laughed. This place has talking cats as well. Hey there kitty, come here and let me scratch you. Oh you look just like an old friend of mine. She could turn into a cat as well. It's been so long since I last saw her. She began to chase the cat around until the cat vanished and appeared on her head, claws already digging into skin. Enough of that you crazy woman. She licked her claws as Kukaku rolled around holding her face. Finally someone I can scratch. It's no fun when your claws slide off people's faces without leaving a mark. Just like Ichigo and Kisuke. Ganju stepped over his sister and kneeled before the cat. Yoruichi-san. The cat perked up. Oh. Ganju recognized me. I'm so happy. You get a lick. She jumped on him and licked his face, making the man laugh slightly. He grabbed her and put her down gently. Yoruichi-san. Was that really Ichigo we saw? Black hair, red eyes, black coat. Yoruichi nodded before raising a paw to point behind them. Ask him yourself. They all looked back and saw Ichigo walking through the busted doors, carrying an exhausted Anna in his arms, his black hair billowing in the wind. Kukaku stood up and walked over to him, eyeing him close. You certainly don't look like Ichigo. Prove it. Ichigo sighed. My father was Isin Shiba. He married a Quincy called Kurosaki Masaki. My name when you knew me was Kurosaki Ichigo. Kukaku threw her arms wide to glomp him in a hug but ended up grabbing nothing. She looked around and saw Ichigo standing before one of the thrones, placing the woman down gently. He had her brown, causing the woman to giggle softly and snuggle towards him. He laughed and moved over to the other throne, dropping himself into it. Ah, that was fun. Anna is about the only person here apart from Kisuke who can really push me to fight seriously. She's all worn out now, but she will wake about. Ichigo love me. Feed me. Never leave me. Now. The woman jumped from one throne to the other, landing on the king's lap and snuggling close to him. Ichigo just laughed and motioned for everyone to come forwards. Kane, Kukaku, Ganju. I've missed you. Except you Kane. I never knew you. The other two, however, I've seriously missed. Ah, I remember the day we broke into Soul Society with a cannon. He laughed and gently removed Anna from his lap. He stood up and walked to them, a smile on his face. Welcome home. Kukaku threw herself at him and he eagerly returned her hug before reaching out and pulling the other two into the hug. Laughing, the four of them fell over and ended up in a pile of tangled arms and legs. Kane managed to remove himself from the pile in a rather delicate manner, hopping up to his feet and stretching before helping the others to stand. Kukaku jumped onto Ichigo's back and hung off him. I'm not letting go. I let go of you once little cousin and you ended up in hell not this time. She pulled him closer and Ichigo just laughed, patting her on the head gently. Ma. Whatever you say Kukaku ni. Now. Introductions. Hi everyone, my name is Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo, that lovely woman sitting on the throne is Shiba Anna, my wife, and the one not here at the moment, but should be in a matter of moments is Shiba Senna, my daughter. As if waiting for the right cue, a small purple bullet sped out from the doorway on the right of Ichigo, who easily spun and caught the child. Dad? You called. Ichigo just laughed gently before placing her down. Not really, but since you're here, why don't you introduce yourself? He motioned to the people standing, and the girl looked at them with bright amber eyes. Hi. I'm Shiba Senna, nice to meet you. She curtsied before breaking out into a huge smile. Kane smiled back, and Kukaku laughed. Nice to meet you kid, my name is Kane, and this is my sister Kukaku, and our brother Ganju. Ichigo nodded before turning to face Anna, who was now draped over the throne wailing. Ichigo left me. Come back to me my darling. No. I actually hate you. Don't leave me. I never want to see you again. She wailed louder and louder as the seconds ticked past, making Ichigo sigh. Walking up to her, he gently tapped her on the shoulder, making her jump. Ah. Ichigo. You came back to me. Didn't I say that I never wanted to see you again? Leave me but bring me snacks I felt like some of that what did you call it? Halal snack pack. Yeah. That. Bring some of that. She draped herself on him and he just laughed. I'll get some brought over from the world of the living. But now, you should get ready. We are leaving for the world of the living then Soul Society tomorrow. Can you be strong for me? She nodded. There's my girl. Now come down and introduce yourself to my family. Then I'll shock the shit out of them. Anna giggled before taking a deep breath, forcing her will to control the hormonal changes occurring in her body. She had held on so well recently, then a slight slip caused her to go out of control, but Ichigo had always been there to take care of her and spar with her when she got violently angry for nothing. She stood and fixed her dress before walking down holding onto his arm. Standing again in front of the guests, she curtsied herself. Please forgive my earlier distractions. I am with child and for us, the reaction is stronger. My name is Shiba Anna, wife of Shiba Ichigo and mother of Shiba Senna. It truly is to meet you. Kain nodded. Oh no. Please. The honor is ours. My little cousin apparently got married to such a beautiful woman. I am truly happy to see our family growing. This is Kukaku, my sister, and our brother Ganju. Senna decided to pull on Ganju's sleeve, making the man look down at her, and her large curious eyes made him smile. Nah, Uncle Ganju, did you really invade Soul Society with 4 humans and a cat? Ganju laughed, and Kain looked at him incredulously. Yeah, that was fun. It opened my eyes for sure, and I made good friends during that little invasion. He began to laugh alongside Ichigo and Kukaku, who remembered the invasion herself. Boy kiddo, did you know that your dad blew himself up multiple times trying to get the cannonball to function properly? Senna laughed. Yeah. When dad told me about that I laughed so hard I cried. Just at the memory, she began to laugh again, mirth forming at the corners of her eyes. Ichigo just sighed and laughed along with them. Yeah, laugh it up. Who lost to Byakuya? Kukaku and Ganju both turned to him. You. Twice. And then they erupted into raucous laughter, which ended up with them falling to the floor, rolling around holding their stomachs. Ichigo pinched the bridge of his nose. He went to speak up but was beaten to the point by Yoruichi and Kisuke, who strolled in. Yeah, but who became a transcendent being capable of taking on none other than Sasuke-san. And won. They both stopped laughing and scratched the backs of their heads sheepishly. Thought so. Nah, Ichigo, I've got the transporter ready, we will be arriving in Kyoto as soon as we step through the gate. Hanami has been notified and Yusaka has already prepared for our arrival. Time to get this party started. Oh, but we can't stay long, seeing as the 3 factions are going to use Kyoto as a neutral meeting point for their peace talks. Don't want to get involved in that now, do we? No. So that's an extra 2 days we have. We can stay longer in Soul Society or we can come home 2 days early, up to you. Ichigo nodded. Thanks Kisuke. Now. Everyone, there is something you should know before we go for dinner. This castle, this whole dimension, and the entirety of hell is my home. I am the king of hell. Ganju promptly fainted, Kukaku went white, and Kain began to froth at the mouth. Are you serious, Ichigo? You became the king of hell. How? Ichigo pointed at the 2 who were not with them at the moment. When they wake, I shall explain, but until then, why don't we play a little game? He smirked, and his crimson eyes began to glow under the shadow of his bangs, and he let out a devilish laugh that sent chills down Kukaku's spine. Ichigo? The gardens looked peaceful. You wouldn't have even registered that there was a major battle that the king himself took part in a couple days ago. A woman strolled through them, savoring the scenery, feeding some little birds that were somehow in the area, and a small squirrel that hopped out from the bushes. Sighing, she sat down on one of the many benches that littered the garden. Lasaki let out another sigh as soon as she sat down. She held her hand up, looking at the back of her hand, where the infinite had been marked onto. Having discarded her place amongst Chaos Brigade as soon as she found out her son was the king, she immediately left their employment but took longer to return to hell, seeing as how she needed some time to think about the past couple hundred years. She dropped her head into her hands, letting out the biggest sigh of them all. That was a big sigh. Don't let your guard down, woman. She looked up out of the corner of her eye, seeing Ulquiorra walking towards her. What are you doing here? I thought you were loyal to the cause, Ulquiorra. The paler ranker just stood motionless. I was. Until I fought Kurosaki again. I felt something inside my chest that reminded me of someone from long ago. The only person who doesn't matter. I want to find that thing again. I joined Chaos Brigade because they promised me that I would find it there. I didn't. So I left. What about you, Quincy? Why have you returned here? Masaki just looked at him. Ichigo is here. I will go to where my son is no matter what. We are family and I will never abandon him again. I will always protect him. Ulquiorra scoffed at her words. He does not need protection. He is the king of hell. He commands the mother of dragons. He commands the horsemen of death. He is death itself. There is no way someone can fight him without getting through those 2 monsters who guard him. And then there is his own power. That man is a monster himself. I admit, the last time we fought, I killed him twice. He stood each time only to fall again. He never surrendered, always holding on to his sword. He finally dropped it when I removed his heart from his body, and even then, he stood back up. The moment I died was at his hands. He is a powerful being, easily breaking the top 10 ranking, and no one would dare fight him. So once again, he does not need your protection. So why have you come here, Misaki? The woman turned back to look at the garden. He is my son. Ulquiorra nodded. That's better. Come, we should meet them quickly. I remember the data given to us indicated that they would be leaving for the world of the living. He turned and walked off towards the looming castle, hands deep in his pockets. Misaki nodded and stood to follow, deep in thought. Ulquiorra looked up at the castle, he himself deep in thought. Kurosaki. I had the most fleeting of moments with a heart. I want that feeling again if I can have it. I will transcend being a hollow and become something else for the first time ever. I am excited. Do not fail me. Kurosaki Ichigo. So you came back. I've actually been waiting for you, Mom, Ulquiorra. Ichigo sat on his throne, on it to his left, and Senna on his lap. Behind him on one side of the thrones was Tiamat, and on the other side was Stram. Both had hard looks in their eyes, and their hands were resting on their respective weapons. In Tiamat's case, she already had Rangaminia drawn and resting on the throne. Stram, however, had his blade in its scabbard. Misaki stepped forwards. I want to join you, Ichigo. You are my son, and I am your mother. Finally, after all these years we can be reunited. I don't want to lose you again. I can't speak for Ulquiorra, but I know I want to stay here. Ichigo nodded before looking at the pale man, whose eyes never seemed to waver. I have my own reasons, Kurosaki. I will not share them here. Maybe one day I will. But my reason for leaving is because I am searching for a heart. Ulquiorra felt his eyes go wide. He looked at Ichigo, and for the first time, he felt nervous. Why? He didn't know. I understand, Ulquiorra. That night in Las Noches changed you. I felt it. If it means anything. I am sorry for stealing it away from you. Ichigo lowered his head. Ulquiorra stepped forward slightly. One punch. For stealing my heart when it was finally so close to me. One punch. Ichigo nodded and went to stand, gently lifting a nervous Senna off his lap before walking down towards Ulquiorra. Dad. Ichigo looked back at Senna and by extension, everyone else watching. He deserves it. All those years ago I stole it from him. Retribution has a way of finding you, no matter how long it has to wait. This is mine. No one is to interfere. If you do, I won't forgive you. He stepped down and stood before the pale man, who had clenched his fist. Prepare yourself. I did so a long time ago, old friend. Ulquiorra took a deep breath and swung. Ichigo was surprised when the fist connected and he felt the stinging pain of something cracking. He felt his head snap to the side and he looked back at the man. It's not enough, is it? Another punch. Never. Punch. I have never. Punch. Never once have I. He lashed out once again, but stopped an inch from the other's face. I have never once lashed out in anger, but with this knowing I am satisfied. Thank you. Ichigo felt his own eyes go wide. But the surprise quickly turned into appreciation at the growth of the man before him. Ulquiorra. You'd make a fine general. You are tactically inclined. You are strong. You are powerful. I want you to join me. Accepted, Lord Shiba. The whole Lord thing, just call me Ichigo. The man looked at him. Very well, Lord Ichigo. Ichigo just threw his hands up in the air, his face already healed, and stomped back up to the throne. Yes, I can't get any better than that. Oh well. Welcome, Cardinal General of the South, Ulquiorra Cipher. Mom, you were already in even before you walked through those doors. Stram, take our new general to the conference room, I will introduce him to the others there. The man nodded and motioned for Ulquiorra to follow, and he did, walking behind the powerful devil. Before the doors closed behind him, he heard a squeal of delight. Grandma. Now, I expect you to learn the layout of this place pretty quick, it's actually not that complicated. The throne room connects to each wing of the castle. This place is called Horizon's Reach, by the way. Like Lord Ichigo said, you are the Cardinal General of the South, meaning the entire southern section of Hell is under your jurisdiction. I myself am the Cardinal General of the North, and the other two you'll meet later. Once you settle in, Lord Ichigo will place you into his peerage, meaning you get all the perks of being a devil without the devil part. We are here. Stram pushed open two large doors that lead to a room with a large circular table. There were 12 seats around it. Ulquiorra raised a dark brow. Isn't this the rumored round table from the humans' Arthurian legend? Stram laughed. Yeah, it is. Found it while looking into an old castle off the coast of the British mainland. The castle itself, I believe, was Camelot, with the city being named after the castle. If you know the legend, then you'd know one other member of the Cardinal Generals. Ulquiorra looked at him, his eyes betraying his growing human sense of curiosity. Mordred Pendragon. Almost tripping over a chair, Ulquiorra righted himself before looking at Stram. The son of Arthur Pendragon. King of Knights. Are you being serious? Hot shit, he actually swore. The two generals turned to look at the door, seeing Ichigo walk through them, followed by two people, two women to be exact. Ichigo sat at a chair he pulled from the table and sat, before motioning everyone else to sit. Looking at the other two, Okaiyora couldn't help but be curious. "Now, let me introduce you to your new comrades, Okaiyora. This is Stram Fausand, former horseman of death, now the Cardinal General of the North." He motioned at the woman who sat on his right. "This is Mordred Pendragon, former Dragon Knight, now the Cardinal General of the East." Okaiyora took in her appearance. She had straight blonde hair, deep blue eyes and a very powerful aura surrounding her. Her armor looked light, but sturdy. She looked back at him, and she nodded in approval. He seems strong, maybe a bit of actual intense training, maybe he can further his resurrection Sugunda atop it here. Perhaps he can learn the truth of it. Okaiyora frowned. "I still don't know the truth of my powers. Interesting. There seems to be much for me to learn from these people." He nodded at her, and she seemed to be satisfied by his response. Ichigo then motioned to the woman sitting on Okaiora's left. "And this is the Cardinal General of the West. Her name is Yamamoto Akroma. Former Valkyria under Odin and the long-lost great-granddaughter of Old Man Yama." This woman seemed perfect in Okaiora's eyes. Black hair that reached her waist. Sculpted armor. Two pure white wings on her back, but the thing that caught his attention the most were her blood-red eyes. He shook his head to clear it, being momentarily lost in thought. When he looked back at her, he saw surprise written all over her gentle face. Incredible. No one apart from Shiba-sama has managed to shake off the effects of Ragnarok so quickly. Ragnarok? Okaiyora leaned in, fascinated with the concept of her powers. "Yeah. It's a curse that was placed on me by my sisters Camilla, Vanessa, Katarina and Trinity when they cast me out. They feared that my powers would rage out of control, so they cursed me with Trinity's power of Ragnarok and cast me into hell. Shiba-sama found me and taught me how to control my powers, and I have devoted myself to him ever since. I was both happy and surprised when he offered me the position of Cardinal General of the West. I can sense great potential from you, Okaiyora-san. Please don't let us down. It was a true shame when we lost the previous general, a man called Roos, so it would truly be a shame to lose you too." She smiled at him and he nodded. "I surely don't plan on dying anytime soon. But to make that permanent, I must begin training immediately. Mordred-san, can you assist me with this?" The woman placed a finger on her chin. "I think Akroma is more suited to this than I am. And please, drop the honorifics with us. We are a team now. But I'll do what I can. We shall begin tomorrow, Akroma." The black-haired woman nodded. "I agree. My powers will be more suited to helping you train, Okaiyora. Tomorrow is perfect. Please acquaint yourself with the castle in the meantime." Ichigo nodded. "Awesome. Now that everyone is acquainted, I should get back to Anna. She apparently ordered HSP. And I am starving. Stram, as usual, you'll be the boss while I am away. Everyone good?" He got nods all round. "Awesome, break." He stood and flashed away from the room, leaving the generals to talk amongst themselves. Okaiyora walked over to a nearby window and he stood looking out over the world of hell. A tap on his shoulder made his head turn and he found himself looking at the crimson-red eyes of his fellow general. "Akroma, is there something you need?" She just nodded and motioned for him to follow, giving him a smile along the way. "Follow me, there is something you need to see. Not even Lord Ichigo knows this and it is a secret amongst us cardinal generals." Okaiyora looked at her curiously. Mordred decided to step in. "It's not that Ichigo doesn't know, he most definitely knows. He just decided to let this thing be our thing and probably keeps the rest of the castle away. Trust me, I've walked in and found Ichigo there sometimes." She placed a hand on the round table and pressed down and a section of the table shifted to reveal a button. Smirking, Mordred pressed the button and a door appeared on the far wall of the meeting room. "Ah, already showing him this? Might as well, let's go." Stram opened the door and walked in, disappearing down a long corridor. Akroma smiled and Mordred whooped as she walked in. Turning to the new general, Akroma extended a hand. "Come, trust me." She gave him a smile. Okaiyora just looked at her with his signature blank stare. A couple seconds passed before he reached out and took her hand, letting her lead him through the corridor. "She could probably kill me in a heartbeat, good thing I took her hand." It's unexpectedly soft, though he shook his head and focused back on Akroma, who was leading him to a light at the end of the corridor. "The others are already there, so guess they got dibs." She frowned slightly and Okaiyora frowned. "Dibs? Dibs on what exactly?" Akroma smiled brightly. "On drinks." She led him through the light and Okaiyora had to blink the spots away from his eyes, having adjusted to the dark of the corridor. When they finally focused, he realized that they were in something he thought he'd never be able to visit. They didn't even have one at Cow's Brigade. He walked over to the nearest stool and plopped himself down into it, draping himself over the bar. "This is an actual bar. 100% real. I've decided to stay here. My seat. Anyone tries to take it from me will be eating a zero for the foreseeable future. Mine. Only mine. His ramblings became incoherent as the group erupted into laughter, Stram placing a stein of beer down before him. That's fine, this is a magical bar, not even kidding. I've been drinking the alcohol here for about 500 years and it's never run out. Not even once. This place does have one special feature about it. Each door you see along the walls allows access to every part of the castle except the king's chambers in the king's wing. It's how I get around the castle so fast. He smirked and Ulquiorra picked up his beer. You're my new best friend. Cheers. Everyone raised a glass. Cheers. Ulquiorra didn't remember much of the night of his induction. What he does remember is a name. Inoue Orihim. Everyone ready? Stram, I leave this place to you. Ulquiorra, you come with me. Akroma and Mordred, do your things whatever they are. Everyone good? Okay. Let's go. Ichigo strolled through the two large doors at the entrance to the castle, everyone following behind him as the doorway began to shimmer and the image of New Lilith began to distort. Soon enough, it had completely shifted into the image of a Japanese palace. As soon as Ichigo stepped through the gateway, he had about 8 different types of weapons pointed at his face. He just laughed at their attempts to stop him. Whoa, calm down. Hanami and Yasaka are expecting me. He easily pushed their weapons aside. But one of the guards, whom Ichigo recognized to be an Oni from Japanese mythology, stepped forwards, club raised, and a war cry on his dot. He swung down his club with a mighty bellow, shocking everyone. No one had ever seen the Oni move that quickly or with such ferocity. Ichigo just chuckled and raised his hand, batting away the club with little effort, but maximum force. The club was basically reduced to splinters. The Oni staggered back, looking down at the remains of his club, before growling and whipping out another club and swinging it horizontally, aiming to take the man's head. Now openly laughing, Ichigo just glanced at the club and it shattered apart, throwing shrapnel everywhere. The Oni dropped to the floor, looking down at the remains of both his weapons. He took a deep breath before bursting out into tears, wailing like a fool on the floor. Ichigo's sweat dropped and took a tentative step forwards, scenes fluttering through his memory of an inconsolable Jidanbo and a pair of axes. Hey buddy, sorry about the clubs. You should know that you shouldn't swing those things so wildly. You could whoops. Ichigo snapped back, narrowly avoiding a small club aimed for his face. The Oni grumbled darkly before standing to his full height. Ichigo felt a tick mark appear on his head. Oi you daft bastard. Give me back my worry. He lashed out with a flick of his wrist, sending the poor Oni flying off into the trees on the other side of the compound. If people were paying attention, they would have noticed the Oni flying through several time periods as well. Ichigo turned back to face the other guards, his body coated with a nameless Yotsuga, increasing his already monstrous power even more. He was about to strike when a familiar voice called out to him. Please don't kill my guards, Ichigo. Turning, he came face to face with an old fox. Crouching down, Ichigo smiled and scratched the animal behind the ear, earning a delighted yip from the fox. It's been too long, Hanami. Since when could you turn into a fox? You couldn't do that when I was here. Hanami pawed him gently before jumping up onto his shoulder. Don't forget Ichigo, you haven't been here for about 600 years. I learned to do this about 200 years ago in the halls of Takamagahara. Amaterasu-sama opened her doors to me, but that is after she got mad at me for not keeping you here, Ichigo. Ichigo chuckled, not noticing everyone else arrive through the gate behind him. Senna pulled at her mother's sleeve. Father is talking to a fox. Is he feeling okay? Anna just chuckled behind his sleeve. He is fine. That fox and your father go back a long time. Come, let us make way. She pulled Senna to the side to allow the others to come through, Kisuke and Yoruichi taking deep breaths of early morning Kyoto air. This is nice, isn't it, Yoru? But it is, Kisuke. Now take your hand off my ass before I shove it so far up your ass that I can give you a handshake through your mouth. Kisuke promptly removed his hand not before giving a final squeeze. Let's just say that Ichigo had to pull Yoruichi off Kisuke before the gate closed with the man's head still between worlds. Now that everyone was settled, mostly, Ichigo turned to face the assembled group. Welcome to Kyoto. This lovely fox kid here will be our hostess, her name is Hanami, the former shrine maiden and former princess of Kyoto. The fox kid bowed. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Ichigo. As he said, my name is Hanami, my daughter, Yasaka, is the current princess, but whenever I'm here I take charge of general affairs. Talking about generals, Ichigo, I see you have brought a cardinal general if the uniform is the same. She pointed with a paw at Ulquiorra, who nodded in greeting. Yup, Ulquiorra is the new guy on the team. Figured I'd use this trip to introduce him to everyone. The south holds all the touristy things anyway. It's where most of the other species hang out too. It's got a Ferris wheel and things. He smiled awkwardly at Anna, who was glaring. Coughing into his hand, he decided to get on with the introductions. Hanami, I'd like to introduce you to Shiba Anna and Shiba Senna, my wife and daughter. Besides the Marcaean Kukaku and Ganju, the rest of the Shiba. That's Lkaiora, and at the back are Kisuke and Yoruichi. Nodding in greeting at everyone mentioned, Hanami held up a paw. Excuse me for a second. She hopped off Ichigo's shoulder and ducked behind a tree. When she reappeared, she wasn't a fox anymore, but rather a beautiful woman with golden hair and golden eyes. She wore a red Maiko outfit which seemed a little too small. She smiled and waved at everyone, letting them know that they were to follow her into the main compound. Isaka sat frozen. Her heart was beating at 1,000 miles an hour. Sweat was forming on her brow, and her hands were clammy. Her seemed especially dry, and no amount of saliva she swallowed or tea she drank would get rid of the dryness she had. She glanced to her right, seeing her mother sitting calmly with a cup of tea in her hands and a smile on her face. She then turned to her left, where the source of her worry was. Sitting in a rather relaxed position was a man who held a power that could completely crush her and everyone in the room apart from her mother. She had only heard rumors about the black-haired man, and none of them were pretty. Some said that he had stormed hell 1,000 years ago, obliterated Lucifer, and had taken the throne for himself. Others said that Lucifer had chosen him to be the next ruler of hell due to his vile nature and his thirst for bloodshed. The most peaceful rumor she had heard was that he simply crushed everyone with his power and taken the empty throne of hell for himself. She was on a mission now to discover how this man actually came into power. What she didn't know was that her mother was on the exact same page. So, Ichigo, how did you end up on the throne of hell? All I can remember from back then is that you spent some time here with me, then you meditated for a while and poof, you were gone in a burst of flame, never to be seen again. She looked at Ichigo intently, waiting for his reply. Yeah, it sort of went like that. After that night, I sat to meditate with a new vision in mind, and I found something that had been sealed away by my own power. Remember how I went to hell to rescue my sister Yuzu? Hell left its mark on me, and Yu has sealed that power away, so hell couldn't influence me. When Juha and Zangetsu were gone, that power decided that it didn't want to be sealed away anymore, so it woke up, taking me from Kyoto into hell, where I underwent the process of regaining my powers, rather violently. At the end of that, I was at the level I reached when fighting Sasuke. I had to go back into my Mugetsu form in order to control that power. I just got comfy to this form, so I really can't be bothered releasing it. Plus I'm so much stronger like this anyway. Not many people can even touch me unless I allow it. He laughed before settling down. His crimson eyes turned to Yusaka, where he stared intently at her, his eyes boring into hers. Oi Hanami, you said that she wasn't mine, why can I feel my own spiritual pressure coming from her? He turned back to Hanami, who was whistling a straight tune. Hanami, is she? Yes Ichigo, she is. Sighing, Ichigo reached up and ran a hand through his hair. He turned to the door and released the smallest pulse of energy. A maid opened the door hesitantly. Please bring Shiba Anna, Shiba Senna, Yoruichi and Kisuke here please. The maid nodded and ran off, closing the door rather quickly. Yusaka could only ponder what was going on. Who is this man? What is this secret about her? The door opened to reveal all the people Ichigo had asked for. They all gathered in the room, bowing to the rulers of Kyoto as they shuffled in. As the maid was leaving, not wanting to be in the same room as people who could flick her out of existence, Yusaka called her back. Bring me Kunu, please. I'm certain she would want to hear this. The maid nodded and scurried off again, returning shortly after with a little princess in tow. Bound once again, she closed the shoji door and bolted away. The little fox princess sat in her mother's lap, similar to how Senna sat in her father's. Everyone sat in silence, but Yoruichi broke it rather quickly. You lied to me Hanami. The older fox sighed. I know. I never wanted anyone to know. I kept it a secret for about 1,000 years. The only one who knew was Amaterasu-sama. Please forgive me. She bowed her head, and Yusaka spoke up. Mother? What is going on? What secret? She looked at her mother pleadingly, but it wasn't her who spoke up, but Ichigo. It's a huge secret, one that if ever discovered, would ruin any semblance of peace for the next 10,000 years. That's how big and dangerous this secret is. No one apart from everyone in this room can know. Which means we will have to seal away the memories of the little ones once we are done. Senna looked at her father with fear in her eyes. Father? What? Why? Anna glared at Ichigo. What are you talking about, Shiba Ichigo? Ichigo just sighed. He looked back up at everyone in the room. The woman currently sitting on the throne of Kyoto is my first daughter. Kisuke coughed loudly and almost fainted. Senna gasped along with Anna. And Yoruichi growled softly. Trust me. I didn't know until about 5 minutes ago when I prodded a Ryatsu with mine. I honestly believed the story I got from Yoruichi, who got the story from Hanami. I didn't know. He looked at Hanami, then to Yusaka. I'm really sorry, kid. If I had known, I would have come back a lot sooner and you wouldn't have had to go through the things you did. If I was around and anyone tried to touch you, I would have murdered them where they stood. He growled loudly, the double-layered tone of his voice sending chills through Kisuke's spine. Now, let's move away from that. The important thing now is to figure out what we are going to do with this information. The princess of the Shinto faction is the estranged daughter of the king of hell. We need to brainstorm. I say we accept this news and make things up as we go along. Kisuke managed to bring everyone's attention to him and he managed to give them the beginnings of a plan. Ichigo sighed. Thanks, Kisuke. This is why I consider you to be my best friend. Right. We do need to work out what we are going to do and what we are going to be. He looked at Yusaka, who took a deep breath. You are my father. No matter what, I will always be of your blood. If anyone tries to claim my throne because of my mixed heritage, I can always rebut them with ancestry. Even though my blood is mixed, my mother is a Shinto princess and my father is a king. She sighed. But I will need time to become accustomed to this new information. I have always lived without a father. I now know why. Ichigo nodded. I agree. You are my daughter. My first daughter. You come from royal blood on both sides. We have to work out how none of this will ever leave this. Ichigo turned to face the door, his eyes narrowing dangerously. We have company. Everyone looked at him curiously before an explosion rocked the compound. Yusaka draped herself over her daughter, whilst Hanami brought up a protective barrier over everyone. Ichigo stood up, his eyes glowing a violent crimson. Yoruichi stood, Kisuke behind her, and Ilkaiora behind them. Who is it, Ichigo? Quincy. He laughed as he heard the screams of the innocent. Grinning madly, the Quincy brought his hands up and launched an arrow at a defenseless maid who was impaled into the closest wall. The arrow didn't kill her, but instead it began worming its way through her blood. She started to scream in pain and agony. The Quincy just smiled wider, mirth building at the edges of his eyes. He spun to dodge a club aimed at his head. Ooh. Mr. The guard could only watch as a hand burst through his stomach and out his back. The Quincy pulled him close. Where is that babe of a princess? Tell me and I'll let you die quickly. The guard grunted and spat blood at the Quincy's face. Ugh, that was filthy. With little effort, the Quincy ripped out the guard's spine, dropping him lifelessly to floor. He stood and took a deep breath, savoring the metallic smell of fresh blood. He turned back to the maid, but his eyes went wide when he realized that she had stopped screaming. He focused on her and noticed that her entire front was drenched in blood. TCH. Bit off her own tongue to keep her secrets. Honorable, I'll give her that. Now to Wand, it was at that moment that it felt as if the world crashed down onto his shoulders. His breathing stopped dead and he could feel his blood screaming in agony. Turning slowly, he found himself staring into the face of a monster. It was the only thing he could think of, his mind slowly receding into the most primal of emotions. Fear. The monster inched forwards and stood before him. Who are you, Quincy? I want your name and your shrift. Now. The pressure doubled, slamming him straight into the floor. He could taste his own blood in his mouth and he managed to spit some out. My name is Lucius the T-Torture Mayberry. The man crouched down and grabbed him by the, lifting him and holding him in the air. Why are you here? What do you want? Struggling to breathe, now coupled with the strangulation, Lucius tried to swallow. It was as if the man felt him trying to swallow and the grip on his loosened if only slightly, but it was enough to let him swallow. I was sent to capture the princess and the kid. His Majesty wants to stop the factions from involving themselves in the war. Nodding, the man dropped him to the floor like a sack of potatoes. He looked around, seeing the dead guards and maids. His gaze lingered over the body of the maid stuck to the wall. She was the one who brought us to our rooms. He turned back to face the Quincy, who had dragged himself to wall and propped himself up against it. I know your Majesty can't see everything through your eyes. That's why I want him to see this. I want him to see me. My name is Shiba Ichigo. I am the king of hell. If he which dares invade my home, I will feed him to the Ing Cerberus as a Ing snack. I know you can hear me, Iwich. Stay away from Kyoto, Tokyo and hell. Stay away from Karakura and stay away from Soul Society. I don't want to hear about you setting foot in Hueco Mundo. I want you to stay hidden where you are. I can set foot within your precious Vandenreich whenever I please, so don't you dare leave. Or I will hunt you down. You have been warned. With that, Ichigo at least tripled the pressure on the Quincy, crushing his internal organs, killing him with spiritual pressure alone. The body of the Quincy slumped to the side, the eyes of the man called Lucius staring at nothing. Iwich froze on his throne. Since he had awoken, he had placed in motion his plan of exacting his revenge on the Shinigami and Soul Society. His plan had been thrown into disarray when Ichigo went missing, with nothing coming from the transcendent Shinigami in 1,000 years. But now, he had reappeared. And it seems that he had become much more powerful than anything Iwich had in his army. Not even his other half was that strong. Not even he was that strong. He watched silently as his Quincy soldier was literally crushed by the sheer force of Ichigo's spiritual pressure. Grinning, he began to chuckle. Patchwolf, bring Miss Basterbean. I need her for an important mission. The Quincy king turned to his other half, who nodded and walked off. She will bring Ichigo, my lost son, to me. I will use her to control him and kill her if he disobeys me. He has a newborn tendency for killing, so I'm sure he will fall for her. He laughed again. His laughter echoing through the hall of Stillborn. Come to me, my son. Born in the darkness. Ash froze on his throne. Since he had awoken, he had placed in motion his plan of exacting his revenge on the Shinigami and Soul Society. His plan had been thrown into disarray when Ichigo went missing, with nothing coming from the transcendent Shinigami in 1,000 years. But now, he had reappeared. And it seems that he had become much more powerful than anything Ichigo had in his army. Not even his other half was that strong. Not even he was that strong. He watched silently as his Quincy soldier was literally crushed by the sheer force of Ichigo's spiritual pressure. Grinning, he began to chuckle. Patchwolf, bring Miss Basterbean. I need her for an important mission. The Quincy king turned to his other half, who nodded and walked off. She will bring Ichigo, my lost son, to me. I will use her to control him and kill her if he disobeys me. He has a newborn tendency for killing, so I'm sure he will fall for her. He laughed again. His laughter echoing through the hall of Stillborn. Come to me, my son. Born in the darkness. Chapter 3. She ran through the halls of the palace. Blood was dripping from her busted arm and from a nasty cut on her forehead just above her left eye. She coughed and felt blood dribble past her. Looking up, she narrowly dodged the sleek black Dido of her attacker. Spinning, she lashed out with her foot but drew it back quickly as something in the back of her head screamed at her. Good thing she did. Just after she brought her foot back, the black Dido screamed through the space her leg had just been, and if it had been extended, then the blade would have cut through skin and bone, and then she really would have been dead. She had believed this would have been a simple recruitment mission, based on what Her Majesty Ichigo had told her. It really shouldn't have resulted in her running for her life from the person she was supposed to be recruiting. She dropped to her knees as a lightning-fast green Zero almost took her head off. Stop aiming for the head. Jesus Christ. Is that too much to ask for? Quiet, we're trying to kill you. Oil Kaiora, she has a point though, you have been aiming at her head for the past 15 minutes, I'm surprised that she's managed to last this long. Very well. I shall stop aiming for her head. But it's easier for me to hit the body than the head. I like to challenge myself. You. Challenge yourself by seeing how long you can hold your breath underwater. Without surfacing. Hey. That's not very nice. I'm agreeing with you here. Why don't you just come out here? Let's talk this over like civilized people. Bambietta growled and tried to run again, but a sigh and something really hard made her stop. She looked up to find herself looking into the face of Kurosaki Ichigo, his blood-red eyes screaming painful death. She gulped and tried to quickly retrace her steps to see if there was any way she could escape. Flashback 3 days ago. Bambietta, I have called you here for a mission, you have no right to refuse. Completion shall see you reap rewards of the highest caliber, failure shall result in you becoming a stepping stone on the path for peace. Do you understand? The woman knelt before her king, her head bent in respect. Yes, your majesty. I understand. Thank you for selecting me for this mission. I shall complete it without failure. I swear it. I thank you. The objective of this mission is recruitment. The target is a person considered to be a special war potential, one who has been missing for the past 1,000 years. His reappearance signals the coming of the time we march for peace. Ichigo stood and walked down from his throne, an act he never usually did, and placed his hand on the woman's shoulder, to which she shivered from the touch. Your target is Kurosaki Ichigo, the current Shinigami Daiko, and the King of Hell. We do not know the scope of his powers, but we expect him to be as strong, or perhaps stronger, than me with my eyes closed. His current location is Kyoto, living in the palace of Yasaka, the leader of the Kyoto Yakai faction. Use whatever means necessary to obtain his allegiance, then bring him to me for re-education. I shall handle that personally. You will have no backup, as I will be looking for a suitable replacement for Sternritter T. There was a young woman who controlled lightning quite proficiently amongst the Solded, perhaps she may make good use of it as a Sternritter. Now, gather what equipment you need, everything is at your disposal for this mission. Prepare yourself well, for Kurosaki Ichigo seems to be quite adept at killing in this lifetime, and has no qualms to do so without hesitation. Now go. I wish you luck, young Bambietta. I thank you, your majesty. I shall now take my leave. Bambietta stood and rushed out of the throne room, eyes set hard at figuring out a suitable strategy for recruiting such a powerful person. As soon as the door closed, Ichigo returned to his throne, where he dropped into it and let out a weary sigh as he rested his head on his left hand. Your majesty. Ashwolf, how are the Sternritter responding to the death of the torture? They all want revenge. Bringing Kurosaki Ichigo to us may result in unwanted violence and many unnecessary deaths amongst the elite. Yes, but with the King of Hell on our side, the war against the Shinigami will be simple and easy. He has power enough to overcome the old Captain Commander with a flick of his wrist. And if I do fall, then he will be a suitable replacement for me. I understand the boons of having him join us, but that leads me to my other question. Why Bastard Bean? She's young and a recent addition to the Sternritter. Wouldn't it be a better idea to send someone who has more experience in recruitment? I would have volunteered to go myself for someone of this importance. The reason I sent young Bambietta was for that exact reason. She is young, she is uli active, and she has an attractive figure. Sending her to lure in Kurosaki Ichigo was the most logical idea. If she manages to seduce the king, then it would be easy to control him through threat of her death. If she manages to bear a child of his, then the threat of his child's death would be logical, and he shall be our dog of war. I make these choices based on what I've seen in the little time I can open my eyes, Hashwolf. And what have you seen for young Bastard Bean? Death. The gate of the sun opened to reveal the bright skies of Kyoto, and Bambietta breathed in a lungful of clean, crisp morning air. Letting out a content sigh, she slung her gear over her shoulder and made for her safe house, which was conveniently located near the Yakai Palace. Looking around, she took in the happy faces of the Japanese population as they begun their morning rituals. Little cafes had already opened to begin serving the early risers, and the smell of fresh bread reached her nostrils. Shaking her head, she kept moving when she had stopped to stare into a window of a bakery, her mouth watering at the sight of freshly baked bread. She looked down at the map she had in her hand, looked around for the street names, and kept moving, her mind wandering as she went. It wasn't even 10 minutes before she reached her destination, a two-story house located in the middle of the street. Good place for a confrontation. If he reacts violently, then I can use collateral damage as a way to calm him down and listen to me. She nodded, set her bags down and rummaged through it for her keys, and quickly moved inside. She cursed loudly as a gust of wind almost revealed her lower half to the world. Eyeing hate dresses. She had to dress for the occasion, meaning ditching her usual skirt and button-up vest for a knee-length white dress and a black leather jacket over it. She wore a wide-brimmed hat on her head and black knee-high boots. Looking around to see if anyone caught a glimpse, she was happy to see that there was no one around and quickly entered the house. What she didn't see, however, was the pale figure standing around the corner from her house, hands in pockets and a helmet on her head. The figure pulled out a phone, dialed a number and held it to his ear. There is one Quincy in the safe house we discovered. My guess is that someone is here for recruitment. Understood. I shall keep watching until she makes a move. Understood, Ichigo. 2 days passed without incident for Bambietta. She had tried hard to force a chance meeting with Kurosaki Ichigo, but alas, there had been little to no chance to get to him. The one opportunity where she had only caught a glimpse of him had been when she was up on the second floor of her house, airing out some of the rugs when he had run past her place. He had been quick, but she managed to catch a short glimpse out of the corner of her eye. That was on the first night she had stayed there, and since then, he had been a ghost. Grumbling, she had decided to be more proactive and decided that if by the third day, she would go meet him. An idea which would immediately backfire in the most violent of ways. It had been easy to sneak into the palace. The guards didn't sense her at all, and she had deftly snuck past them without making even the slightest of sounds. The guards who patrolled the halls were half asleep as she snuck past. Looking around a corner, she counted the number of guards, waited a second, and ducked through an open door, hiding behind it as the guard walked past. Letting out a quiet breath, she continued to move, eyes darting left and right, searching for any signs of guards or her target. What she never noticed was that it was stupidly easy to sneak in, or the guards muttering into an earpiece telling someone of her exact location. She rounded a corner to avoid a guard, but her blood ran cold as soon as she did. On instinct, she activated her blood vein and guarded against a vicious kick that sent her sailing through a couple walls. She coughed up blood and grimaced in pain. She did a quick check and found that, even though she defended, she had sustained serious injuries. Her arm was broken and cut badly, as the blood that was flowing from a nasty cut proved, and she had cut her head as she flew through a wall, and she was sure that she had a couple broken ribs to boot. She pulled herself from the rubble and dodged an axe kick that would have popped her head like a melon, fear permeating every pore of her body. Looking up, she found herself looking into the blood-red eyes of Kurosaki Ichigo, the King of Hell. She let her body take over, and she did the most logical thing she could think of. She ran. Ichigo looked down at the woman before him as she cradled her broken arm and protected her busted ribs. She began to crawl back, but stopped when she slid into the legs of Ulquiorra, who had silently moved behind her. She looked up at him and cried out in fear, seeking refuge in a nearby corner, where she huddled and brought her knees up to protect herself as best as she could. Sighing, he walked over and stood before her, to which she responded by whimpering in fear. "Hey. How bad are your injuries?" He waited a second for her to respond, but got nothing. Still looking at her, he let out another sigh before he bent down and picked her up, cradling her in his arms. She, of course, freaked out. "Hey. Do you think you're doing? Put me down." He glared at her, forcing her to shut up. "Well, Kaiora kicked you pretty hard back then. I'm sure your arm is broken and a couple ribs as well. Your Reiatsu is fluctuating, meaning you're struggling to keep yourself awake. I guess you're new at this whole thing, aren't you?" He started to walk towards the back of the palace, where guards were lined up and waiting. "How did you know that I was new?" "Well, the guards at the door noticed you immediately and they contacted Kaiora here, who told me, and I told them to let you in. Everyone made way for you. I was expecting you to attack and try to fight it out, but you snuck through the palace and made your way to somewhere potentially dangerous for you. Which is why Kaiora kicked you back the way you came and away from there." She nodded in understanding, her head dropping slightly at the thought that she had failed her mission. He knew she had been there the entire time and had actually made way for her to get to him. If only she had just knocked and asked to see him. Ichigo turned a corner and walked into a wide open area with a table in the middle, where he set her down. She looked around, worry etched onto her features. She looked to where Ichigo was and found that he was gone. Instead, she saw something dangerous. She saw hell. Death. Violence. Hate. Anger. Rage. Evil. A range of emotions crossed over his face as he looked at her. Then he nodded. The cloth was placed over her mouth and nose. Her eyes bulged with fear and she screamed into the cloth, trying not to breathe in the chemical which was trying to send her under. She fought valiantly, but her efforts in the end were in vain, as she felt herself slipping under. She managed to pick up a couple things before silence took her. She heard the sad voice of Kurosaki Ichigo. What the hell did Ichigo do to this poor girl? Ichigo watched as she drifted off into unconsciousness, her head gently laid down onto a soft pillow. Footsteps sounded out beside him, but he didn't turn to face the newcomer. "Father? Who is this woman? She was dangerously close to Kunu's room before, I have half a mind to kill her where she is." Her tails bristled dangerously, a couple of her fingers twitched with anger, but a gentle hand from her father calmed her. "Isaka. This woman, her name is Bambietta Bastardbean, Sternritter E, the Explode. A new addition to Ichigo's Star Knights. She is a victim of that man. Her body has been extensively modified without her consent. Her eye is not hers, as there is something in there that would probably kill her if she rebelled. Her heart is not hers, her lungs either. Her left arm has had the muscles removed then replaced, and her right leg has had the same thing done to it as well. Her spine has various implants that force cooperation. I believe that she was an unwilling member of the Star Knights, forced to comply through any means necessary. A stolen child." Isaka felt disgust well up in her stomach. As her father continued to tell of the woman's various modification, she felt herself getting sicker and sicker at the thought of what they've done to her. She walked over and gently brushed a stray strand of hair away from the girl's face. She's also most likely been forced to undergo a rapid aging process. By her soul's feel she should only be about 10 to 13 years old, but she looks about 20 to 25. She is only a bit older than Kunu, but has already been forced to do things not even an adult should do. Yusaka spun, her eyes full of fury aimed at the man called Ichigo. How vile. That man doesn't even deserve to be called human. A monster would only do these things. A monster without measure. Father, is there a way to fix her, all of her, to give her a life free from that man? A way to let her experience a childhood free from the Quincy? Ichigo shook his head. There is no way to remove her Quincy powers, the only way I know is by using Let's Still, but that would destroy a part of her, and the method to regain them is even more dangerous, so I don't recommend it. But there is a way to remove every single modification in her body and return her to her natural age. Yusaka perked up, her eyes filled with hope. How, father? Inoue Orihime. So we have to get to Soul Society earlier than anticipated, get Inoue-san's cooperation, and fix Bastardbean-san. Correct? Yeah, Kisuke. Can you set up a Senkaman now? I'll go with Kaiora and Yusaka. Having her there would get us through the gate, no problem. Plus, she's still technically in Kyoto, so her going to Soul Society shouldn't be dangerous for her. As for everyone here, I need you to hold down the fort. Kisuke, you are in charge of taking care of the sleeping Bambietta. Yoru, can you look over Kunu? Preferably in cat form so she doesn't suspect anything. Anna, you and Senna should return to hell and send either Akroma or Mordred here as backup. I know Kaiora is powerful, but we are gonna be facing foes who have been training non-stop for 1,000 years if they decide to make their move. Anna nodded and she lifted her fingers, clicked, and opened up a breach to hell, where Akroma and Mordred walked through. Anna then took Senna back through, but not before the young girl gave her father a hug and her sister as well. Be careful, Yusaka-ni. Yusaka smiled warmly, embracing the girl tightly. I will, little sister. Run home now and listen to Aka-san. Understand, little one? Hi. Yusaka ni. Can I come play with Kunu later? Of course, little sister. When all is said and done, you can come over anytime you want. Yay. Bye-bye. With that, she walked through the open portal with her mother following close behind. She looked back at Ichigo, her eyes filled with worry. You too, my love. Be careful. I'll see you at home, okay? Okay. Until then, my love. And she took walk through the portal, which promptly closed behind her. Ichigo looked up at the assembled forces. Ulquiorra stood beside Akroma, who had a determined look on her face. Mordred leaned up against a wall, eyes scanning the room for any possible threat. Kisuke was setting up the Senkamen, and Yoru had already gone to protect Kunu. Isaka was off with Hanami preparing for the Soul Society trip. Looking at his generals, he began. We have a plan, and we will technically be Ryoka within Soul Society, as we are going to be going through an unauthorized Senkamen. They will be on high alert. I have 2 orders. First, no killing. Incapacitate your opponent and make sure they aren't in any life-threatening situations. Second, find Inoue Orihime. If you find her, bring her to me immediately. If you find her location, relay it to me via mental link. I will also be out on the field searching. Understood? Hi. Good, Kisuke. Ready and open. Ichigo looked up and saw the open Senkamen. Nodding, he walked to the door and opened it, eliciting a startled yelp from Yusaka, who grumbled. Change of plans. I will be going alone. Having you away from Kyoto may be too dangerous. Hanami has already transferred control of the Lee lines to you, and you must be here to regulate them, correct? Yes, father. I was about to mention it to you now. Father. Ichigo, is she? Yeah, Mordred, she is. I'll explain it to everyone after, we have something to do now. Let's go. He got a nod from the armored woman, and they all made their way to the Senkamen, with Ichigo going through first, followed by everyone else. Kisu closed the portal and smiled when he heard Yusaka whisper to herself. Be careful, father. Rukia sprang up from her desk when the alarms began to blare out a worrying tune. Intruders within Soul Society. Warning. Intruders within Soul Society. Level 4 warning. UN restricted use of Zanpakuto is authorized. Warning. She hurried to her captain's office. Yuki, take Taicho. What's happening? The alarm. Breath, Rukia-chan. Squad 12 has increased the range of the warning sensors to encompass up to District 50. This means that we either have a powerful hollow attacking or a powerful enemy has just made a move. Anyway, we have to report to our station now. He smiled at her, to which she smiled back. Right. I'm off, Taicho. I'll go gather with the other lieutenants. She flashed away, leaving her captain to his own task of reaching the meeting hall, where the other captains were gathering to discuss the situation. She made her way to the lieutenant's meeting room rather quickly, but found that everyone had beat her there. Renji. Rukia. Has Yuki Take Taicho said anything about the intruders? If a level 4 warning was issued, then that means we are facing some powerful intruders. No, he hasn't said anything. The last time we face a warning of level 3 was when those 2 from hell attacked and almost wiped out 3/4 of Sirte. Be what? She ducked as a huge explosion rang out from the eastern gate, her eyes shooting in that direction. Jidambo. The other lieutenants all picked themselves up, shaking the dizziness from their heads away. They were about to move when an alarm they had never heard before sounded out, and it brought fear to their very core. Warning. Intruders in Sirte. Warning. Intruders within Sirte. Level 7 warning. Use of Bankai authorized. Lethal force authorized. Intruders within Sirte. The groans of the big man guarding the gate was all that could be heard. Ichigo felt sorry for him, as he was good friends with the gentle giant after his first invasion. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to delve into pleasantries. He looked to his left, where Mordred stood, sword drawn and crackling with red energy. Clarent blood, Arthur. She looked at Ichigo and gulped. Sorry. It's fine. Don't use that inside the walls. Understood. Go. Now, find Inoue and bring her to me if you can. All of you, move. With that, Akroma took in a burst of speed, her wings propelling her forwards at a sickening pace, breaking the sound barrier as she skimmed the rooftops towards the western end of Soul Society. Ulquiorra buzzed away to search the north. Mordred dashed forwards to search their immediate area, and Ichigo moved to the south, goal clear in mind. It didn't take long for Shinigami to cross his path, and the distant explosions echoed true for the others of his search party. He quickly dispatched the defenders as he made his way to one of the areas where she must be, Squad 4 barracks. He knew facing down on Ahana would be a stupid thing to do, but he had no choice. A buzzing sound made him look to his right as a spinning blade sailed at him. He followed the chain that was attached to the blade and recognized it as Kazushini, Shai Kai of Hisagi Shuhei. Reaching up, he snatched the spinning scythe as it flew past him, inspected it, frowned and yanked the chain towards him with a bit too much strength. The wielder shouted out as he flew from his perch and straight at the attacker. Surrender. Now. There is no chance for victory. Hisagi managed to avoid a bare-handed attack aimed at his shoulder. His attacker frowned at him. I know you have Bankai. Why don't you use it? Because I don't need it to beat the likes of you. Hisagi leaped forwards, scythe ready to be launched, when a foot was planted in his stomach. He spat up blood as he was launched through the streets of the Sirte. He finally came to a rest when he slammed heavily against a wall. He could feel his bones grinding as he tried to move, falling back to the floor as a useless heap of muscle and flesh, unable to even stand. He could only lift his head as the intruder landed in front of him. Bastard the captain, he will surely defeat you. He spat up blood as he drifted in unconsciousness, leaving Ichigo in the silence. Sighing, he bent down and applied basic first aid, closed his wounds, and made sure he didn't have any serious internal injuries. Once he was satisfied that Hisagi wouldn't die, Ichigo set off to continue his search, making his way to the now ominous-looking Squad 4 barracks. Now why is such a lovely young lady like yourself carrying such a dangerous-looking weapon? Mordred perked up at the silence being broken by the speaker, whom she sensed to be making his way to her location rather quickly. Turning her head slightly, she found herself looking at a middle-aged man wearing a white coat under a flowery pink jacket. Raising a blonde brow, she turned and rested her weapon on her shoulder, a murderous smirk making its way onto her beautiful face. You talking to me? From what I can see, the young lady behind you seems to be carrying a weapon almost as dangerous as mine. Shouldn't you be chastising her as well? True, but my little Nanao doesn't invade people's home and swing her sword around like she owns the place. I'm not saying that's what you're doing now, but from what I can tell, and the residual energy coming from the gate, you were the one who broke the large wooden doors and killed the gatekeeper. He tipped his hat and shadowed his eyes. Mordred leaned forwards and began to laugh. Ahahaha. If you're talking about Yadanbo-san, then he is very much alive. Master just used Hakifuku on him to make sure he stays out of this. Can't have the keeper interfering. Talking about interfering and whatnot, tell me, do you know where Inoue Orihime is? She watched as the man shifted his foot back slightly, preparing for an attack. Mordred, for her part, just lifted her blade from her shoulder and brought it to rest by her side, her knuckles cracking as she flexed her grip on the pommel. Inoue don't know. Why are you after her? She is far out of your reach now if that's what you're after. She has the best security in the whole of Sirte. Mordred just smiled. So she was adopted by the captain commander and made the heir of the Yamamoto clan. Thanks for the info. She felt herself get giddy with excitement and cracked her neck when the man before her lowered his head more and placed his hands on his own blades. Her suspicions that battle was coming were confirmed when the man looked at her, his eyes devoid of life, and said in a murderous gaze. Nanao-chan, get to the captain commander immediately. Tell him Orihime-sama is in grave danger and to look after her. Young miss, may I have your name? Mine is Kairaku Shunsui, captain of Squad 8 of the Gate 13. Mordred just shrugged her shoulders. Sure. My name is Mordred Pendragon, daughter of Arthuria Pendragon, king of Knights of Camelot and the current Cardinal General of the East. She raised her blade so that it was now level and pointed at the captain. Cardinal General of the East? East of what? He raised a brow when her smirk returned full force and her eyes glowed crimson. El Clarent Blood Arthur. You can come out now, Mr. Captains. I know you're there, so there really isn't a point in hiding. Akroma spun gracefully, using her wings to turn herself around, spear ready for a surprise attack. She was pleasantly surprised when none came. Instead, she found herself looking at two men and two women. Both men were tall, one dark-haired and had a stubble on his face, and the other had hair white as snow. The women were gorgeous in her eyes. They both carried themselves similarly, so she figured they were twins, and both used bows of light. Two Quincy and two Shinigami. This is going to be fun. She touched down gently and gave a short curtsy. Greetings, my name is Akroma, the fallen Valkyrja, the host of Ragnarok, and the current Cardinal General of the West. Oh, I'm sure grandfather would be pleased to see me, can you direct me to him? The black-haired man spoke first. Oh? You have a grandfather here in Soul Society? I didn't think Valkyrja would be related to Soul Society in the first place. I'm sure Odin wouldn't be very happy. Oh. I'm being terribly rude. My name is Kurosaki-isan, captain of Squad 10, and this is my lieutenant, Hitsugaya Toshiro, and my co-third seats, Kurosaki Yuzu and Karen. Akroma frowned, something which Isan picked up on. Something wrong, Akroma-san. Yes. Something is very wrong. The fact that it's wrong means we must inevitably fight. Please forgive me for injuring you, know that I do so with a heavy heart. She raised her spear, light gathering quickly, causing the blade to shift from a metallic silver color to a white. Seal of light. She brought her spear down, and the 4 defenders dodged, each jumping in different directions as a white seal appeared beneath them and exploded. They all turned to face her when suddenly a gigantic explosion of red erupted from the east, followed by an equally gigantic explosion of green from the north. Isin turned to face the explosions, his eyes wide with fear. He turned back to Akroma and clicked his fingers, causing 6 rods of light to slam into her stomach. Smirking with victory, Isin made his way over, but was quickly pulled back by Toshiro as Akroma swung her spear up, almost cutting his chest open. Isin watched as his Kido shimmered before breaking apart with ease. Her voice brought him back to the fight. God's shield. Makes me immune to all status effects. Binding, burning, freezing, sleeping. Nothing affects me. Come. It is time for battle, Captain, for the sake of my master and his goals. I shall keep you here. Ulquiorra dusted his hands as he walked away from the short captain of Squad 2, whom he had completely overpowered without any warning. She had appeared before him, barking orders at him, demanding his cooperation. He quickly got tired of her, so he aimed a Gran Ray Zero at her feet and launched it point blank. No one was killed, thankfully, but everyone would be out of commission for a little bit. He looked in the direction of the captain commander's office. I'm coming, Inoue. Stay here, daughter. These intruders are here for you, based on the information gathered by Nanao. I will be here as well, as there is no better security than me. Yamamoto turned to face the doors, waiting for the intruders to arrive. They hadn't been here long, but they had caused a significant amount of damage. Captain Soifrong was already out of commission. Captain Kairaku was currently engaged with one of the intruders, and Captain Kurosaki the other. 2 of the intruders were unaccounted for, which means they would be making their way here. He readied his hand on his cane when a knock was heard on the door. Come in. Face your opponent with honor. The doors opened and he heard a stifled gasp come from Orihime. Looking at the enemies, Yamamoto frowned, his grip getting harder and harder. Now this is surprising. A hollow in the Sirete. Be assured, you will be the last. He drew his sword, flames raged around the room, but staying away from Orihime. The orange-haired woman could only stare in abject horror. Standing before her was a man she thought long dead. She reached out, hand passing through the flames. Ulquiorra. Is this real? Are you really here? The hollow glanced at her, watching her outstretched hand reach for him. Sighing, he shot forwards, completely getting past the flaming titan in his path in a second. Yamamoto spun, sword whipping through the air, only to be stopped by a black-clad hand. Enough, old man. We need her for something. She will be returned with nary a scratch on her persons. I assure you this. Yamamoto turned to look at the new person in the room, haven't even noticing his arrival. His eyes widened slightly when he saw the black hair and crimson eyes. He grit his teeth and poured every inch of spiritual pressure he could muster into his sword. Bankai. Zenka no Tachi. Sighing, the black-haired man reached forwards and gripped the charred blade that was the captain commander's Bankai, said to be the most powerful fire-based Zanpakuto in existence. Fool. You shall lose your hand for this transgression. If you surrender and pull your forces out, then I shall be lenient and execute you swiftly. As he was shouting, the doors behind them flung open to reveal every captain, and through the windows on the right appeared the other 2 intruders. Just as they laid eyes on the unfolding scene, they saw something that brought forth fear of death, even from the most battle-hardened captain. Sleep now, Raijin Jaka. As soon as the name left the sword vibrated and returned to its sealed state, shocking the captain commander to the core. He looked at his blade and mentally communicated with it for the briefest of moments. How? Why would you seal yourself? I cannot refuse this man. He is more powerful than anyone we have come across. His words are like commands from God or even death itself. Forgive me, Master. Growling, he turned back to the intruders, who now had gathered by the window, Orihime firmly in the grasp of Ulquiorra. Return my daughter to me. Now. Or face the might of the Gate. Sighing once again, the black-haired man lowered his Ryatsu, crushing everyone in the room, but as soon as the pressure hit them, their eyes went wide, both with fear and realization. They watched as his black hair fell from his head, his crimson fade away, and the armor covering him flake away. And standing before them, Kurosaki Ichigo turned to face them all. I said we need her for something. I promised that she will not be harmed and return to you promptly. Have a little faith in me. You used to have so much before I went to hell. What changed? Got senile. He stepped forwards and addressed everyone in the room. I swear that she will be back by tomorrow afternoon. After that, we have many things to discuss. Ichigo turned and clicked his fingers, opening a Garganta back into the world of the living, which caused some confusion. Before they stepped through the tier in the dimensions, 2 screams made him stop. Ichinai. Oni-chan. He turned back to look at Karen and Yuzu, who were staring at him with hope in their eyes. I'm sorry. He let his power rage forth again, his hair extending and a white armor covering his body. The transformation was instant, and Ichigo was in his Bastolord form, a large zero already charging between his horns. Kurosaki. Uryu appeared behind him, Seal Schneider swinging towards the horn, only for his blade to be caught by Okaiwara, who gripped the blade with 2 fingers, shocking the Quincy. You died. How? That does not matter now. My lord, the mission is accomplished, the woman is in our possession. Let us retreat. Nodding, Ichigo launched a zero at the floor, destroying a large chunk of the office, sending debris flying everywhere, obscuring them from sight. Shouting, Yamamoto swung his sword, dispersing the dust, only to reveal it downed Uryu and no Kurosaki. Growling, Yamamoto slammed his reformed cane into the ground. Old Captain. Pursue Kurosaki to the world of the living. He is currently in Kyoto if what I saw was true. Return my daughter to me. Now. A chorus of yes rung out, quickly followed by the sound of shunpo. Turning, he saw Issen standing in front of the twins, who were crying into each other's shoulders. Issen, why haven't you left? I gave an order. Yes, but that was Ichigo. He shouldn't be able to be here. Why was he here? What does he want with Orihime? Who were those 3 that were with him? I have so many questions, but no one to answer them. He grit his teeth and clenched his fists. What is he doing? Why invade Soul Society? They stood in silence until a voice broke it. I believe I can answer a couple of those questions. They looked up, eyes going wide when they found the speaker. Yamamoto spoke first, dropping to one knee. Soul King Sama. Why have you descended? Because of Kurosaki Ichigo or the King of Hell. He is here because he requires Yamamoto Orihime's powers of rejection. That is all I know. I haven't been able to get more out of Amaterasu. She denies knowing of his plans. Yamamoto growled. Issen fell to his knees and sighed. Ichigo, why? Why would you attack all of us, even your sisters? Ichigo. Let me go. There are injured people in Soul Society that need to be healed. I have to go. Enough. Orihime flinched at the volume Ichigo used to silence her. She stared at him in shock, backing away slightly. I brought you here for a reason. I put my family at risk for a reason. You are not to ask questions or demand things from me. Just do as you're told. He glared at her, his once again crimson eyes boring into her soul. She could only nod and sob quietly. Sighing, Ichigo took her by the arm and led her to the room where he had left Yusaka with Bambietta. Noticing his arrival, Yusaka perked up. Father. Have you brought her? Her condition has deteriorated. It seems like Iwich is trying to kill her before she is separated from him. Orihime felt her eyes go wide when Yusaka spoke. Father. Ichigo has a daughter. Why? With who? Her head shot up and anger filled her veins. She was about to retort when a crushing spiritual pressure filled the room. She looked up at Ichigo, who was looking at the opposite wall. They're here. Mordred, keep them busy. Ulkaiwara, stay here and protect Bambietta, and by extension, her. Akroma, go greet you grandfather. I'm sure he is dying to meet you. The 3 nodded and 2 left in a blur. Ulkaiwara turned to Ichigo. What will you do? Ichigo could hear the curiosity in his voice and gave him a wicked smirk. I'm gonna go distract Iwich. Ichigo had left rather quickly, leaving Orihime alone with Ulkaiwara. The pale hollow turned to her. Stand and come here. Now. I will have no objection. Move. She stood and walked over, the conditioning from a 1000 years ago still present. She stood silently next to him and he turned to Yusaka. Yusaka-sama, please reveal our young friend. The fox nodded and waved her hand, revealing a table with a young woman lying on it, deathly pale and breathing quickly. Orihime felt her blood run cold. Who is this? What happened to her? She reached out and felt for a pulse, immediately using what medical knowledge she learned from Anohana to determine the cause of her distress. This young woman is a Quincy. Forced into servitude by a madman. She has been extensively modified through rather nefarious means. We believe your powers of rejection can't save her life. Orihime looked up at Yusaka. She felt a knot in her stomach when she spoke. She could feel Ichigo in her, and her whole presence was violently intimidating, not on the level Ichigo was, but very high up the list. And why should I help her? I could just leave her to die. I don't owe you anything. Yusaka growled, slammed her hand down on the table and leaned forwards, her 9 tails now in full display and twitching violently. Because I'm telling you to do it. Hurry up. Fath. Don't you dare call him father. He is not your father. You're probably some wench trying to. Her world stopped. Everything froze. She dropped to her knees and struggled to breathe. A hand grabbed her by the front of her top and lifted her into the air. She felt her blood run cold when she found herself staring into the violently crimson eyes of Ulkaiwara. He was glaring at her with such violence that her heart threatened to stop. Suddenly, a hand plunged into her chest, blood poured from her mouth and splattered all over the floor. It lasted a second, but she felt fingers wrap around her heart, fingers that felt so cold. Suddenly, her heart was crushed and she felt herself leave the world behind. She dropped to the floor, clutching her chest. Looking down, she saw that there was no wound or blood. Looking up, she saw Ukiura staring down at her, his face set in a murderous gaze. Don't you ever disrespect her again. If you do, I won't just hit you with murderous intent, I will straight up murder you. You are speaking to royalty, but not only that, you are speaking to the daughter of the King of Hell, my benefactor and my king. Learn your place. Now do as you're told. I won't repeat myself again. If I have to, it'll be because I'll be ripping your powers from your chest and giving them to someone else. He let his power recede and let her breath again. She tentatively stood and stumbled over to the table, her eyes wide with fear and her body drenched in sweat. She looked at the girl on the table, wondering how he had only managed to crush her with his power and not anyone else in the room. Santin Kessin, I reject. Her barrier formed quickly and the golden glow indicated that she was doing what she had been told. Nodding, Ukiura placed his hands in his pockets and began his watch. Yusaka stood and watched, curious about the power she displayed, but still pissed about the way the woman before her had treated her. It'll take me about an hour to heal her. That is fine. Take as long as you need. The others are occupying the invaders. She looked up, her face set with worry. Don't worry. No one will be killed. Ichigo-sama has given strict orders not to kill, only to incapacitate. There are more dangerous things coming and the world needs to be prepared. She looked back at the Quincy on the table. She opened her mouth to speak but was interrupted. The witch is momentarily blinded. He cannot see or do anything for about half a day. How goes things here? Ichigo strode into the room, his eyes falling on the golden barrier. Good. Was she trouble? Ukiura nodded. As I expected. Can't have things the way they were before, huh? Shame. She watched as Ichigo walked over to Yusaka and placed a hand on her shoulder and the woman instantly relaxed into his touch and she began to nuzzle his chest. Once a fox, always a fox. Just like Hanami all those years ago, tell me she loved it when I done this, how about you? He scratched the base of her ear and she let out a delighted yip to which she furiously blushed and attempted to swat his hand away. Father? Ahahaha. Sorry kid. Guess I'll head out to the battle myself. I think my old man is looking for me. Karen and Yuzu as well. I'll introduce you later. He turned to walk away, raising a hand over his shoulder. Work quickly, Yamamoto. He vanished a second later. Orihime turned to face Yusaka, who was playfully growling in the direction her father just went. You really are his daughter. Yusaka turned to face her, her face set in annoyance. Yes. You sound skeptical though. Of course I am. How could Ichigo have a child? There is no way that he could. It's been 1,000 years since you've last seen him. Is it so difficult to accept? She turned to Ukiura, her brows set in an angry glare. Yes. It is difficult. I loved him. I want nothing more than to be his. Why did he end up with someone else? Why didn't he ever look at me? Have you ever considered the fact that he may have not reciprocated your feelings? Have you ever thought about what he would have felt for you? I understand that he invaded Hueco Mundo for you, but he also invaded Soul Society for Kichiki Rukia and subsequently Hell for his sister Yuzu. Father is the kind of man who would do what his heart decides is the right thing to do. He cannot be chained down, well, except for now, with Anna Aka-san and Senna-chan. Orihime felt her heart skip a beat. Anna? Senna. Who are they? Anna-sama is the queen of Hell and his wife. Senna is the crown princess of Hell and his second child. Her whole world seemed to shatter with that one statement. Ichigo is married and he has another child. He really doesn't love me. She looked at Ukiura, who was looking out into the distance. Yusaka frowned. Something is wrong. Akroma Dono seems to be struggling. Ukiura didn't respond. Could it be someone has set off Ragnarok? Her eyes went wide. Ukiura turned to Orihime. Stay here. Do not move. Continue healing her. Yusaka-sama, forgive me, but something is compelling me to be by her side. I can feel it. And it hurts. I need to go. Yusaka nodded, raised her hand and clicked her fingers. 3 people appeared out of nowhere, but Orihime could feel power pouring off them in waves. They were easily as powerful as her adoptive father, especially the blonde-haired man and the red-haired man. Thank you for answering my summons. Surziches, Akuja, Serafal. I humbly apologize for being so presumptuous. She bowed her head, to which the only woman in the group dashed forwards to stop her mid-bow. No need, Yusaka Dono. Shiba-sama asked us to be at the ready and to move in case you needed us. We have been ordered to assist you with anything you need. Yusaka smiled. I thank you, Serafal Dono. Please guard us whilst Ukiura Dono goes to assist his fellow generals. Surziches nodded before turning to Ukiura. You've probably never faced Ragnarok before, so let me tell you this. She needs a powerful external stimuli to snap her back to reality. Shiba-sama told us that he contained it by beating her to submission the first time round, but that resulted in the splits and gorge. Be careful though, she's about as strong as me, maybe even stronger than me when she's using the power for Ragnarok. Oh, now, make haste, Cardinal General. Nodding, Ulquiorra vanished in a burst of Sonido, leaving everyone behind. Akroma, why am I being called to you? Why does Ragnarok feel so intimate? Who are you, Akroma? Isin landed heavily, his sword cracked in many places, and the tip broken off. Looking up, he saw the person he was fighting alongside Kichiki, Yukitake, Soifrong, Hirako and Unohana. It's the same person who wiped out Jidambo. Damn, this woman is insanely strong. He stood up and was enclosed in a light green box, feeling his wounds vanish before the box opened and he was ready to jump back into the fray. He vanished with Shunpo, appearing beside Yukitake. How goes it? Not well. This woman is about as strong as Sensei. Maybe she's about as strong as one of the Royal Guard. This is extremely difficult. She calls herself Mordred Pendragon. According to human history, Mordred Pendragon is the child of Arthur Pendragon, the king of knights in British history. Never was it mentioned that Mordred was a woman. Isin nodded. A difficult fight indeed. Karen. Yuzu. On me. The girls responded quickly, appearing behind their father with quick bursts of Shunpo. We are going to hit her with all we got. Full power Jutsuga Tensho from the three of us should break her defense even momentarily. A second is all we need. They nodded. Good. Ready. Another nod. On my mark. They all raised their swords, spiritual energy pouring into them, materializing as blue flames pouring are from their swords. Jutsuga. Tensho. They all shouted as they swung their swords, the torrents of energy arsing straight at Mordred, who was happily dancing around the battlefield, blocking strikes from the attacking captains and countering with precision. She looked up when she felt the three attacks getting closer, a worried smile making its way onto her face. Oh shit. This is gonna sting. Heads up. Her head shot around and she caught a glimpse of Ichigo shooting past her, sword drawn. He stopped before the combined Jutsuga, raised his sword, caught the attack on the flat of the blade and, with a flick of his wrist, redirected the attack skywards, where it detonated harmlessly. She noticed the shocked faces of the three who attacked and she went to launch herself at them when Ichigo raised his hand and blocked her path. I've got this. Go help Akroma. Ulquiorra is on his way. Ragnarok is going crazy. The old man must have done something stupid as per usual. Mordred nodded and took off in the other direction, worry plastered on her face. Ichigo looked up at the now assembled captains. Let's begin, Soul Society. Isin watched as the person he now recognized as Ichigo sent his comrade away, earning a snort from Soifrong. Idiot. He can't be thinking of taking all of us on. It's suicide. They all frowned as Ichigo spoke. Let's begin, Soul Society. With that, he vanished, appearing behind Soifrong in an instant. The petite captain spun, foot swiping in a kicking motion, but yelped as her foot was caught and she was launched at the ground, where she created a sizable crater, taking her out of the fight instantly. 1. Hirako raised his sword, beginning the twirling motion for the release of his Shikai, but he didn't get far as Ichigo appeared in front of him and punched him through his sword, shattering the blade and launching him into the distance. 2. Next was Unohana, who launched a powerful Kido spell at him, to which he responded by redirecting the attack back at her with ease, his hand smoking from grabbing the spell. 3. Ichigo's head snapped up when a million petals floated around him. Looking around, he caught sight of Byakuya with his hand raised. Kikei, Senbonsakura Keiji Ashi. The petals wrapped around him before beginning to compact. 4. Byakuya spun to find Ichigo behind him, fist raised. He hit the Kichiki head with a straight jab into the stomach, doubling him over, before grabbing his scarf and throwing him into a building. Looking behind him with a slight tilt of his head, he flashed away from Yukitake, who had his Shikai released. He spun when he heard footsteps behind him, spinning and slashing, but hitting nothing. Turning again, he found himself facing Ichigo, who had his hand raised right in his face. Inamuri. And that makes 5. He caught the sickly captain before he hit the ground, lowering him gently. He turned to face the last 3. His father and his 2 sisters. Isin stared in shock as Ichigo easily dismantled the attacking front, all of it happening in the time span of about 30 seconds. Gulping, Isin raised his sword but was taken aback when Ichigo appeared in his face, hand extended. He couldn't bring himself to move or try to counter as Ichigo ripped Injetsu from his grip and threw the blade away. You'd raise your sword against me? Go-chin, Soul Society really has changed you. I get the fighting at home, but Soul Society has made you a soldier who raises his sword against his own family. Isin grit his teeth. And what about this? What about what happened in the Captain Commander's office? You fired a zero at me. At your sisters. Would you have simply let me leave? I have my reasons for doing what I did. I don't expect you to understand me. I thought after all this time, maybe Seoul society had changed. I had hoped that it would be different. All that was achieved was the changing of the guard. A dictator for a tyrant. Isin reached forwards and grabbed his son by the collar. That tyrant, as you call him, was trying to protect his family. If you had simply knocked and asked for cooperation, we would have discussed it amongst the captains and have come to a decision. Would you have listened? Ichigo swatted his father's hand away, his eyes squinting. Would you actually have discussed it? Or would the captain commander have denied any means of peaceful negotiation without hearing the needs or reasons? Don't tell me that he would have listened, because I tried to promise him that no harm would befall his daughter, pleaded that I would have her home by tomorrow, but what does he do? He uses his Bankai. His Ing Bankai. He didn't care about listening. He wanted something and he didn't care about who got hurt as he tried to get it. Then. He sends you as his own personal attack dogs to reclaim what was lost. What does that sound like to you? A dictator. Isin was stumped. Here he was, trying to understand his son, his boy who had vanished from his life 1,000 years ago, only to find that his son was now a man. Sighing, Isin took a step back and crossed his arms. Ichigo. Help me understand. I want to understand. Why couldn't you just knock? Ichigo crossed his own arms. Because the man who took mom away all those years ago is coming back. Which is still alive. And he's powerful. Much more powerful than you. Not as strong as I am now, but he can crush the gate under his thumb like a child would an ant. There is no time for cordiality. I needed Orihim. So I took her. With this, at least the Sirite will be on alert. He's already made his move, and I was forced to do something in return. Isin was now dumbstruck. Which? He's still alive. That's impossible. There is no way that could be possible. The old man killed him almost 2,000 years ago. Ichigo looked at him. It didn't work. He managed to go into hiding. I know where he is and how to get to him, but I can't do much at the moment. I have more pressing matters to attend to than dealing with a Quincy demigod. Ichigo turned to face his sisters, who had remained quiet throughout their fight. Yuzu, Karen. I'm sorry about what I did. I had no choice other than create a diversion to get away. He walked over to them, breathing slowly, letting his powers vanish, revealing the form they were very used to. The orange-haired, brown-eyed big brother they always knew. It didn't take long for Yuzu to throw herself into his arms. Karen followed shortly after. He held them close to his chest, taking in the changes they had gone through over the years. Yuzu had gotten taller and she had let her hair grow out. All in all, she looked just like how their mother looked when she was younger. Karen, on the other hand, had kept her hair short, letting it reach her shoulders. She wasn't as tall as Ichigo, but she was slightly taller than Yuzu. Smiling, he picked them both up and spun, the girls laughing, a sound he hadn't heard in a long time. He stopped dead when he felt a vibration in the air. He put the girls down and moved them behind him, placing himself between the oncoming torrent of dark green Ryatsu and them. His eyes went wide when the wave hit them. Ulkai-Ora. Whilst Ichigo handled the captains and his family, Ulkai-Ora had found himself in quite a difficult situation. He dodged a swing from Akroma, who was now seething with black energy. He reached out and caught the incoming swing with a dark green lance made from his energy. He had quickly been pushed into Segunda Etapa after arriving to assist Akroma, with the arrival of Mordred being a blessing. But the power they were facing was something crazy, with his Segunda Etapa being released and Mordred wrapping her sword with the power of Clarent Blood Arthur to boost her physical attack. It didn't take long for Mordred to be incapacitated, with Akroma aiming for her first. They fought, Mordred valiantly putting up a good fight, but Akroma was just getting stronger and stronger. It was at this point that Ulkai-Ora found himself in his current dilemma. Should he call Ichigo for help? Or try to get Akroma back to help and get help from Stram? Surely that monster of man would be valuable assistance right about now. He looked and dodged an overhead swing that would have cleaved him in two. He quickly spun, using his tail to lash out and push Akroma back, creating some breathing room. He steadied himself and analyzed the situation. She's far more powerful than me now. I'm on the defensive. I cannot pierce her armor and I cannot block her strikes. She isn't as fast as me though, and her attacks have a bit of a wind-up. I may be able to break through to her if I can just get in close enough. What would Ichigo do? What a stupid train of thought. That fool would just get himself stabbed in order to get close and seal her movements. That I see. He looked up as Akroma charged at him, spear raised for a strike. I see now why she felt so similar to me. I understand everything, why I found myself moving faster to get to her, why I've fought so hard to get her to recognize me, why I wanted to save her, the first person I've ever wanted to save. He braced himself, energy lance at his side, eyes set dead straight. She has my. The spear tore through him. The pain was unlike anything he ever felt. Akroma looked up at him in shock, her black eyes wide with surprise. She went to tear the spear from him, but his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. I've got you now. She looked at him. It's only been about a couple months since I joined you. In that time, I've gotten to know you. You're patient, kind, timid, gentle. Perhaps you are the best of us. The only one of us who knows what she wants. You want a partner. Someone to share your burden with. Not once have you found that someone, as they all fall to the power of Ragnarok. But there is no need to search anymore, for I am here. He reached up and gently took her in his hand. She froze at the touch, but she started to lean into it. The smile found its way onto his face. I will share your burden, I promise, for you are my heart. It was at this moment that he brought all his power into himself, taking in all the surrounding energy as well. He felt like his entire body was about to explode, but he grit his teeth, not wanting to forsake the person before him. He reached down and grabbed onto the spear, ripped it from his chest, raised it to his mouth, and bit it, tearing a chunk of corrupted metal into his mouth. It was at this point that all the power inside of him burst forth, exploding out as a torrent of dark green Ryatsu. Akroma could only watch, her sanity restored to her by the actions of the man before her. She heard him scream out from within the vortex of power that had appeared. Ulquiorra. No. Stop it. You don't have to do this for me. Please. Ulquiorra. She reached out, but the power was spinning rapidly, and she couldn't get close to him. She watched in horror as the vortex began to spin faster and faster, with green bolts of lightning shooting out from within. Then it froze as if on command. It just stopped and began to fade away. Looking into the eye, Akroma saw Ulquiorra standing there, but something was different. Not wasting time, she lunged at him, reaching him just as the power completely vanished. Her heart froze when she saw him. Standing there was Ulquiorra, alright, but he had changed. There was no helmet fragment on his head, no hole in his chest, and his skin had changed color. All in all, he looked human. She caught him just as he was about to fall, and she dropped to the ground, worry etched all over her face. Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra. Please. Say something. Please don't leave me, come back please. Tears fell from her eyes, and she didn't notice the arrival of 3 captains, whom had swords drawn. Finally noticing them, she summoned her spear to her and raised it protectively over herself and Ulquiorra. The 3 captains were known to her, the middle one being Kairaku Shunsui, flanking him were Kenpachi Zaraki and Kurasuchi Mayuri. Well, now this seems like fun. I'm glad I have 2 specimens to take back. Guess this wasn't a failed mission after all. Kurasuchi stepped forwards, needle in hand. Get back. Don't you dare touch us. I'll kill you. Ho ho. Such fire. I think you'll be perfect for my collection. Especially that hollow. I have never seen a hollow lose its mask and hole before. Don't worry, I promise not to cut him up too much, you'll still be recognizable. His vile smirk grew wider, but it quickly turned to horror as a presence made itself known behind them. Turning slowly, they all came face to face with Ichigo, who was breathing bloody murder. Back off now. The double-layered tone of his voice left no room for discussion. He walked past them, but as he walked past Kurasuchi, his hand shot out, grabbed the needle from the man's hand and stuck it into his eye, and extended the needle. It didn't take a rocket scientist to see that he had just killed the clown-faced captain. Zaraki looked at Ichigo with confusion etched on his face. Would you kill him? Because not everyone is who they seem. Everyone turned back to the corpse, only to see that the skin was flaking away, revealing a bald man with an extra eye on his forehead and a pristine white uniform. Kairaku spun towards Ichigo, who was tending to his wounded friends. Broid Lloyd the Y yourself. Quincy Sternreiter, elite dog of Yoruichi. Probably here to take back the explode from us. And to gather data on us as well. You okay, Akroma? What happened to Ulquiorra? Zaraki and Kairaku looked at each other as Akroma explained what happened to Ichigo, who nodded in understanding. I see. I know what happened. It's very rare for this to happen to a hollow, even rarer for it to happen to an established ranker who have halted their evolutionary process. It's called humanification. It's what happens when a hollow regains their heart and their memories. Basically he's a human with Shinigami, hollow and Valkyria powers. There is no telling what his limits are now. The Chroma looked stunned at this revelation. He became human for me? Ichigo smiled at her. He did because that stupid fool accepted that he loves you. The obtaining of resurrection involves taking on an aspect of death, such as isolation. Segunda etapa is when you surround yourself with the opposite of your aspect, such as Ulquiorra and the Espada. This is when you completely, utterly and truly reject your aspect. He didn't want to be isolated anymore. He wanted something that he truly longed for. Companionship. He longed for you, Akroma. He's gonna be on a rollercoaster ride of emotions he's never even dreamed of having. He'll need you now more than ever. He turned to walk away, but stopped when Ulquiorra spoke, surprising them all. If she wants, if you allow, I want her to be my maid. Ichigo smirked, his playful glare landing on Akroma. Well? Do you want that, Akroma? Yes. Perfect. I hear wedding bells. Ooh, this is gonna be fun. Haven't had a wedding at Horizon's Reach since Urzucha's married Grafia. Oh, I can hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet. I can't wait. Ichigo skipped, literally, away, a big smile on his face, before he stopped and turned to face the old man, who appeared not too long ago. He saw the look on his face as he mouthed Akroma's name and laughed loudly as realization appeared on his face. Akroma. I see now. You're my grandchild. Stolen from Soul Society and taken to Valhalla by Auden. Everyone who heard him faulted. Ichigo just laughed and walked over to the old man. Ready for that chat now? I believe Orihime has finished her task, and I do believe that this fight is now over. Shall we, Captain Commander Yoruichi Yamamoto? The grizzled titan looked at him and nodded. I am inclined to agree, Shiba Ichigo. If you don't mind, I think I need to sit down for this. Ichigo laughed. Of course. I'll have my daughter bring us some of her jasmine tea. It does wonder for headaches. He froze when he realized what he had just said out loud in front of the now completely gathered Gate 13, including one moronic old goat. Daughter, has my little Ichigo finally crossed the line into adulthood? Has he finally blessed this old man with many grandbabies? Oh Masaki. I feel as if I can now cross the barrier between life and death with peace in my soul and a song in my heart. He would have continued if he hadn't been knocked squarely on the back of the head by a metal bow. Shut up, Isin. I could hear you from hell. How can your voice irritate me in another dimension? Isin spun and his eyes went wide. Standing behind him, with anger on her face and an arrow knocked on the bow in her hands, was Masaki. Think I need to sit down for this? Ichigo laughed. Of course. I'll have my daughter bring us some of her jasmine tea. It does wonder for headaches. He froze when he realized what he had just said out loud in front of the now completely gathered Gate 13, including one moronic old goat. Daughter, has my little Ichigo finally crossed the line into adulthood? Has he finally blessed this old man with many grandbabies? Oh Masaki. I feel as if I can now cross the barrier between life and death with peace in my soul and a song in my heart. He would have continued if he hadn't been knocked squarely on the back of the head by a metal bow. Shut up, Isin. I could hear you from hell. How can your voice irritate me in another dimension? Isin spun and his eyes went wide. Standing behind him, with anger on her face and an arrow knocked on the bow in her hands, was Masaki. Honey? Is that why my eye? Chapter 4. Could I love you anymore? Ichigo sat across from Jinrikisai, a pot of freshly brewed tea sitting on the desk between them. Coughing, Ichigo decided that the silence had gone on long enough and that it was time for talk. So are we at peace? The old man at least had the decency to look mildly sheepish and let out a quick cough. We are. I once again ask for forgiveness. Had I known that you would keep your word on the safety of my daughter, I would not have acted so rashly. He lowered his head slightly, and Ichigo knew that this would be the closest thing to prostrating that he would get from the old man, and decided that it was plenty. Please, raise your head. Now is not the time to be fighting amongst ourselves. There is a much bigger threat looming over your heads and over mine. Jinrikisai looked up, his eyes narrowing at the mention of a threat capable of phasing the king of hell himself, and decided to bring his question forth. There is something that worries even you, Shiba Dono. Ichigo laughed slightly, before leaning back on the very comfortable cushion he was sitting on. It was a reaction that lasted the whole of 5 seconds, before he leaned forwards and crossed his fingers before his face. Trihiksa. Jinrikisai froze. Now, he wasn't supposed to know about all the other supernatural dimensions, but ever since the addition of Kamamurasagen to his forces, he always kept an ear to the ground when it came to dangers from the outside world. So of course, he knew about the beast from the Book of Revelations and the global threat it posed. Growling slightly, Jinrikisai leaned forwards and reached for the tea, but was stopped by a gentle hand from besides him. Looking to his left, he came eye to eye with Akroma, the last surviving member of the Yamamoto family. Allow me, grandfather. Smiling sadly, the ancient titan allowed the girl to serve him and Ichigo some tea, before returning to the conversation at hand. The beast from the Book of Revelations. I see. That would indeed faze someone like yourself. From what I have gathered, the beast feed of powerful beings such as yourself. If you were to fall victim to that monster, then the worlds will truly perish. Nodding, Ichigo took a sip of tea and mentally noted that he should thank Yasaka for the absolutely delicious blend. Of course. That thing escaped me once, during the Great War. It came out momentarily to try and take the corpses of the biblical god and Lucifer, who both perished, but Kisuke, Surziches, Ajuka, Stram and myself managed to get it to run, but we permanently made 3 layers of hell uninhabitable for about 300 more years, not counting the 1000 that have already passed. The sheer fact that it could push me to release Bankai, Resurrection and Volstandig makes it dangerous enough that even I would approach it with caution. Though I think the reason it ran away was the fact that both Great Red and Office rocked up. He laughed lightly, before his eyes glowed crimson. If they didn't, we would have all died. Ginrik's eye felt himself shrink before the fury of the King of Hell. Not even he could radiate the sheer amount of scalding rage Ichigo was currently emitting. My king. Akroma leaned towards Ichigo, and Ginrik's eye reached out to stop her, but when her hand touched Ichigo's shoulder and snapped him out of his rage, it left the grizzled titan wondering how she could withstand the heat. Before he could ask, Akroma turned to him. A power I was cursed with many years ago is called God's Shield. It makes me immune to any sort of superficial injury like burns, frost and minor wounds. It also means I cannot be bound by any sort of sealing technique. She smiled sadly. It also meant that anything could bypass God's shield would not be able to get out. So far, the only thing that has managed to do so is Ragnarok, but that was done through the combined efforts of my sisters. Her eyes found the floor very interesting. They were people I thought I could trust. People I grew up with in the only home I had ever known. So easily they betrayed me. But now with Ulquiorra by my side I think I may be able to face them again when the time comes. A startled gasp was heard beside her, and when Ginrik's eye and Akroma looked at Ichigo, he was full bleeding all over the floor, using exaggerated hand movements to signify immense bleeding, before dramatically falling to the floor, still bleeding before he used his hand to simulate a chest burster from the movie Alien exploding from his chest. He even made little alien sound effects. Akroma stared deadpan. Ginrik's eye stared deadpan. Misaka sighed into her hand. She made her presence known by walking over the low table, grabbing the now empty pot of tea, and dropped it on her father's unsuspecting head, where it landed with a meaty thwack, which was honestly music to the ears of the three present who had to witness that sorry scene. To Ichigo, an idea popped into his head as soon as the pot landed, and his eyes glinted with unnoticed glee. He jumped to his feet, startling everyone in the room, ran to the wall, pulled out a giant poster of Anna, and stuck it to the wall. Thank you, father, without you this would not have been possible. Anaya. My loving daughter has forsaken me. She has already hit her rebellious years. Where have I gone wrong? How can I make her low plargs? Shut up, you idiot father. Yusaka lashed out with her foot, collecting Ichigo right on the back of the head, slamming his head, followed by the rest of his body, right through the wall, where he proceeded to go rolling down the corridor. Well, I said, daughter just shook her fist violently at him as he rolled away. Ulquiorra sat up in bed when Ichigo rolled through the door and landed rather spectacularly on his feet by the foot of the bed. He turned to look at his newest friend. How you feeling? Everything healing right? He grabbed the clipboard that hung off the bed and gave the notes written on them a quick read. Good thing Go-chin still practices as a doctor even in Soul Society. Now vitals all normal, heart rate normal, a little low on vitamin D and iron, but that's from spending so much time in Hueco Mundo, so he's prescribed supplements. Yep, good. Alright. From a doctor's standpoint, you're ready to leave, from a friend's standpoint, let's have a chat. Ichigo set the clipboard down and pulled up a chair, sitting across from his loyal general. How you feeling? I feel. Ichigo laughed. Of course. You did something that all but one hollow has managed to do in the past, well, one hollow that I've discovered. It's not something that we can help you with. It's something that you will have to do alone. Well, Akroma will be by your side the whole time, so alone you shan't be. Ichigo leaned back, eagerly awaiting the response to Akroma being mentioned. He wasn't disappointed. Akroma, yeah, hey, what do I do? Ichigo burst out into laughter, before standing and walking over to his friend and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. How very human. It was all he said, before he turned and left Ulquiorra alone to ponder his human heart. He now had a destination in mind and felt reassured by the familiar presence of Mordred and Hanami, who were with their newest addition. Oh, hey Ichigo. Mordred turned her head to face him, and she got a nod from him in response. Hanami looked up at him, her eyes a mixture of emotions. Ichigo walked over and stood by the side of the bed, where a sleeping child lay, a child barely the age of 10. She was younger than you predicted. And according to the Yamamoto princess, there was much more than what we originally thought. Ichigo turned to her, but the angry scowl she wore signified that the Dragon Knight was actually rather angry. Scowling himself, Ichigo looked back at Bambietta. How much? No one responded. I asked how much. Hanami sighed and went to answer, but another voice cut in. About 75% of her complete internal makeup had to be repaired. Lungs, liver, kidney, both eyes, heart, half her stomach, her complete small intestine, half her large intestine, her uterus and her everything had to be rejected and repaired. It is a complete miracle that she was even alive. Ichigo turned to face Yamamoto Orihime, who was leaning against the wall. Ichigo frowned yet again. Why couldn't I sense you? I scanned the whole room 3 times on the way here. Orihime reached into her pocket and pulled out a small trinket. Father gave this to me. It hides my Riatsu by absorbing any that I leak by pushing some of my own into it. It was given to me in case people try to kidnap me again. Guess it doesn't work. No. It works. Not even I could find you. Don't lose that, Yamamoto. Ichigo turned from her, but she got his attention back. Kurosaki-kun. Could we talk in private? After? I need to work out what I'm gonna do with Bambi. You could always give her back. Ichigo was in front of Hanami and Bambi in a flash, and Mordred had shielded Orihime a second later. Standing behind them, having just emerged from the shadows, was Iwich himself. Standing taller than Ichigo, he cut an imposing figure, especially when he held a glowing Reishi broadsword in his hand. He looked around the room, eyes darting to each person, quickly determining who was the biggest threat in a matter of seconds. He lifted his blade and held it to Ichigo's. Return her to me. Now. I won't ask again. When Ichigo didn't react, he forwards, only for his blade to be caught on a finger. He felt his skin crawl as a wave of hollow power rushed forth from the man who stopped his sword. Interesting. You don't even need your mask anymore. Have you made such a clarent blood, Arthur? Mordred brought her sword down in a two-handed zanjutsu swing, the blade carrying the force of a nuke. Iwich felt fear for the first time as the blade neared his face. He hadn't even seen her move, nor even when she drew her sword. As the sword drew closer, Iwich was enveloped in shadows, and just before the blade nicked his hair, he was gone. Unable to stop the swing, Mordred followed through, seeing as how she could still partially sense the energy of the intruder. The resulting explosion was catastrophic, and it sent the entire palace into meltdown. That was close, Your Majesty. I know. I completely underestimated the Cardinal Generals. Not only that, but I underestimated Kurosaki Ichigo. Hatchwolf, he stopped my blade with a finger. The blonde man froze. It seems impossible, but it is most certainly true. Kurosaki Ichigo cannot be brought to our side. He may not be defeated, I cannot be certain unless I open my eyes. Bring me our guest. I shall discuss with her if there is a possible way of defeating Kurosaki Ichigo. Iwich dropped into his throne, resting his head against his hand. Hatchwolf bowed and made to leave, but an immense power landed on his shoulders that brought him to the floor. Looking up, all he could see before he was violently thrown through the closest wall were the crimson eyes of Kurosaki Ichigo. He couldn't move. His bones screamed in agony. His very blood coiled within his veins, trying to get clear of the abomination that stood before him. He felt his blood freeze within seconds of meeting the eyes of the intruder within his holy kingdom. I thought I told you to stay away from Kyoto. I also said I could step foot within your precious Vandenreich whenever I pleased. Congratulations, Iwich, you've successfully gained my complete attention. All Iwich could do was swallow. He was in for a very bad day. Orihime coughed and spluttered. There was dust, ash, rubble and debris everywhere. Red lightning screamed through the cloudy skies. Yamamoto-sama. She looked up to see a chroma standing above her, a giant wall being lifted up by her tiny frame. Thank Lucifer I found you, Yamamoto-sama. Quickly. This area has become highly unstable. I do believe that bimbo Mordred disturbed the ley lines when she charged after Iwich. Boy. I heard that. You're even more blonde than me, bitch. Enough of that. Get moving. Ichigo-sama has gone to confront Iwich. I felt his Quincy powers rip open the Schattenreich. We must stabilize the ley lines before he returns, otherwise his very presence may shatter them, and that would be a global disaster. The chroma, Mordred and Orihime looked up at Ulquiorra, who was wearing a slightly different outfit, one that looked like Ichigo's, except white with a black sash around his waist. Looking down at Orihime, Ulquiorra scowled when the woman smiled at him. Get moving. Akroma, when you finish helping out Yamamoto Dono, report to Lady Asaka and do not leave her side. Mordred, you will take Yamamoto Dono back to Soul Society and act as a forward guard in case the Quincy manage to shake Ichigo-sama. I will contact Stram Dono and inform him of the situation here. We have jobs to do. Let us make haste. With that, the man vanished from the spot, moving at speeds that Akroma only attributed to Ichigo. Mordred whistled as he vanished. He can really move, huh? Didn't even see him take a single step and I can sense him on the other side of the compound. Well, we have our jobs. Let's get to it. With that, Mordred jumped down to where Orihime was and pulled her from the rubble. You alright? No serious injuries? No trauma? Concussion? Lacerations? No. Nothing. My Shun Rika protected me just before I got pancaked. Do you know when Kurosaki-kun will be back? Mordred turned her head slightly, eyeing Orihime. No idea. Ichigo is probably taking on Iwich at this point in time. If that is the case, then he won't come back for a couple days at most. Orihime felt her heart clench. If you were gonna tell him your feelings, how you feel and the fact that you love him, I will tell you now, don't bother. It won't end well for you and for Soul Society. Orihime felt her body tense, filled with dread that this woman had figured her out so quickly, but that sense of dread faded quickly and it turned into white blind rage. Who do you think you are? Who are you to tell me what I can and can't do? What gives you the right? Don't you dare pray. Her words died in her when Mordred turned to her. Who am I? I'll tell you. My name is Mordred Pendragon. Former Dragon Knight of Camelot. Daughter of Arturia Pendragon, King of Knights. King Killer. Demon Hunter. Witch of Blood. False Horseman of War. The Crimson Blade. She who killed the Le Pucelle d'Orleans. Cardinal General of the West and a Guardian of Hell. Second in command of the Cardinal Generals under the Horsemen of Death and Cardinal General of the North Stramfausend. That's who I am. Who are you? Yamamoto Orihime, formerly Inoue. Princess of the Yamamoto clan, daughter of Jinrikisai Yamamoto, head captain of the Gate 13. That's it. There is nothing else to your name but others' accomplishments. Rejecter of reality. That was because the Hejoku gave you that power and because Ichigo was around you so much all those years ago and he didn't have an iota of control. Was you gaining your power, your status, gained by your hand alone? No. When you reach my level, not even that, when you reach Akroma's level, then you'll understand status. You earned nothing. Everything was given to you. So I will remind you. Do not even think about telling Ichigo how you feel. Understand. Ichigo has already left you behind. He's married, has 2 children and has a third on the way. He's the king of hell and my benefactor. Do you understand? Good. Conversation over. Get moving before I throw you through a hell breach. I was told to get you to Soul Society, doesn't mean I have to play by your rules. Mordred backed off and walked away. Anger, rage, confusion and dis literally rolled off her in waves. Orihime, for her part, just broke down in tears. Never in her life had she been a victim of such humiliation. So what if she didn't have as many fancy titles or accomplishments to her name? She had known Ichigo longer than any of those wenches by his side. His wife. Trying to stain his name. His daughters. Nothing but tools created to hold him back. His soldiers. Pawns, expendable tools. She was irreplaceable to him. He dived headfirst into Hueco Mundo for her. He tore Soul Society apart for her. She dropped her head into her hands and shook. She would show them. She would show them all. She would take Ichigo, bring him back to Soul Society, where he could be with them, with her, his family, his real family. And she would be his wife. Bear his children. Love him like only a lover could. She would kill his enemies. Kill his friends. Anyone who stood in her way to him would wind up dead. All for him. Everything for him. Only him. Mordred just sighed. Stupid bitch. She's gonna get herself killed. She shook her head as she watched the auburn-haired Yamamoto princess descend slowly down a path that she was completely sure would get her killed in the end. And there would be no one to blame but the auburn-haired healer obsessed with someone who wasn't hers. Isaka leaned up against a wall, Kunu hidden behind her flowing cloak. She looked up at the now clearing sky, with small tendrils of light filtering through the dark clouds, lighting up the dark world beneath. This sure has been a bad day. I gotta thank Mother for helping restore peace to the Lee lines. I couldn't have done it without her. Then I have to give Mordred a nice fat lump right between the eyes for using Clarent Blood Arthur right in the middle of my home. She rubbed her temples, hoping for the throbbing headache to magically disappear, when a tug on her sleeve made her look down at her worried daughter, a soft smile on her face. What is it, child? Who is she, mama? In the white dress by the broken window. Yusaka looked up and saw the girl who her daughter had pointed out, and her blood ran cold when she recognized Bambietta, standing a short distance away, a shard of broken glass to her. Kunu, stay here. Don't move. If anyone comes, send them to me. Understand? Yes, mama, why? I can't tell you now. But that girl needs help. I hope one day, I pray that she will one day understand why we saved her. With that, Yusaka shot off, headed straight for Bambietta, who was inches away from driving the glass into her. No more. No more. No more. No more. The words rang over and over in her head. When she had awoken, she heard the voice of the man who had stolen her. The man who gave her to a monster. The man who let monsters have her. She could remember each of their faces. And each of their shrifts. He for the torture, who handled her re-education. Them for the miracle, who miraculously healed her every time they broke her. Y for yourself, who used the faces of her family to violate her. Z for the zombie, who tore her apart and put her back together again. She could feel the places where the zombie ripped her flesh off, only to replace it with something else. She could feel the fingers of the yourself as he forced her legs open. The phantom scars where the torture stripped her of her sanity. Even the smiling face of the miracle was filled with malice, as she knew that he was only smiling so he could see her broken once again. And again. And again. And again. And again. And again. She lost count after the yourself brought the roar, the fear and the jail down to play with his new toy. And play they did. She brought the glass closer and closer. This was okay with her. She wanted this. It was the only way to make the voices stop. The only way she can be safe. The only place they can't find her. But wait. The zombie could always find her. She just needed a corpse. Then the fun would begin again. She could feel the prickling of the glass against her skin. It was funny though. Even now, at the end, her hand was steady. There was no shaking, just the realization that she was finally going to be free. She wouldn't have to deal with the knives peeling her skin. The sensation of having her virginity ripped from her every single time the miracle healed her and the yourself raped her. The feeling of her muscles being ripped from bone. Her eyes being ripped from her skull. Being forced to watch as they pulled her insides out. She couldn't even throw up when the zombie kept her alive, so she could make her watch as she inflated her lungs like balloons outside of her body. Deciding that it was time to say goodbye to the world, she closed her eyes and the glass towards her, but when her hand didn't move, she opened her eyes to see a woman's hand holding the same piece she was going to use to end herself. "What are you doing, young miss?" The voice was strained, as if it was holding back a flood of emotions. Looking at the source of the voice, Bambietta found herself looking into the teary eyes of a golden-haired woman with eyes the same color. "Why did you stop me? I can feel them in my arms. I can feel them everywhere. Please. Let go. Let go. Let me go. I don't want to be used anymore. I don't want them to use me. I'm not their toy. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not." She broke down into mutterings, leaving Yasaka to look at the broken girl in her arms. It was then that she realized that everything had gotten quiet. Looking around, instinctively pulling the girl closer, Yasaka extended her senses, looking for anything that could be a threat to the girl in her arms. "Hey." Bambi got smaller, didn't she? As not. Bambietta felt her heart stop dead. She knew that voice. She feared that presence. She turned her head slowly, and, standing behind her and Yasaka, were two of the most feared people in her entire existence. "It's us, Bambi. Lovely Giselle and is not. Here to take you home. Or what's left of it any woe there." Giselle bent over backwards at an extraordinary angle. Whist is not simply used hearing Kyaku to move out of the way of the highly explosive trail of blue fox fire that engulfed almost everything it came into contact with. "Lady Yasaka. Everything alright?" Standing next to her, having moved there in a flash, was the now human Ulquiorra, who had a very displeased look on his face. "Ulquiorra don't know. No. Everything is not alright. These two guests have arrived unannounced and insist on leaving after sampling the food and drinks without leaving anything for compensation. Please treat out guests kindly and show them what is done to thieves in this home." Ulquiorra looked at the daughter of his king and then at the pale and utterly terrified child in her arms. The look of terror in her eyes kindled a sort of protective instinct in his heart. "This heart will be the death of me." "Excuse me?" "Nothing, my lady. Forgive me. I shall deal with our guests accordingly." He stepped forwards, his power starting to roll off him in waves. Giselle and Asnat both looked at each other before turning to face the threat that was walking towards them, hands in pockets and a displeased scowl on his face. He stopped before them, gave them a once-over, before sighing and taking a relaxed stance. "You have one chance. Take it and leave. Never return, either here or what's left of the Vandenreich. If you do not take my offer, you will both die here today." He let his power soar and crushed both Giselle and Asnat under the sheer weight of his power. "DCH. This guy is strong. How can someone be this powerful?" Giselle dropped to her knees, and as soon as she did, a grey blur shot over her head and slammed straight into Ulquiorra. Grunting, he flung the attacker off to the side, away from Yasaka and Bambietta. Drawing his sword, he prepared for a counterattack when he heard a voice. "Bruce? Wait, you belong to the Z now, don't you? Which means that Ewich is still alive. I knew I didn't get to take the man's head that time." Looking to his right, Ulquiorra felt relief flood his system when Ichigo appeared from a small clump of shadows. "Oh. It's the king himself. Hey, Asnat, do you think I can make him part of my collection?" Ichigo looked at his left shoulder, which had the now drooling Giselle hanging off it. He just laughed. "What's so funny? Do you think that you're too strong to become part of my collection? Or that I'm too weak to even try to?" She raised her hand to scratch the itch that was starting to build up in the center of her chest, only to find something was stopping her. No matter what she did, she just couldn't scratch that infernal itch. "Hey. When you jump on someone, try to make sure that they are not stronger than you. Cause, if you don't, then you'll lose your arms." She looked up at Ichigo, then down at what remained of her arms, only stumps that ended at her elbows. She cocked her head to the side, walked over to a random corpse that was lying about, used her teeth to rip the arms off at the elbows, and attached them to her own bloody arms. "Tada. Just like changing a wardrobe. Only I can just take everything." Her stare changed from creepy to downright sadistic. "Oh Bambi, you should have seen me when I was taking you apart. I was so wet down there, I'm pretty sure I used something from that room to myself, if you know what I mean." She laughed before dragging her hand down between her breasts and down to her crotch. "I used Youg." She doubled over in pain when a knee was slammed into her stomach. Stop talking like you're a woman, you man. Giselle glared up in between ragged breaths, her blue eyes landing on Yasaka's golden orbs, which radiated fury and rage in the form of red lines that creeped up from behind her eyes, like red spiderwebs. Her power then started to rise, and Giselle met the challenge, raising her own power to match. Think you can take me? The zombie herself. I'm a Sternritter bitch. Roos. At her command, Roos appeared in front of Giselle, arm cocked back and ready to strike. Whoa there, Imma just nick this. Giselle nor Roos, whose sickly grey skin matched his previously grey hair and silver eyes, flinched when a red blade cut through his arm, cutting cleanly just below his elbow. Looking to her left, Giselle saw Mordred and Akroma both standing atop some rubble, the former with a grey arm held tightly in her grasp. Roos, are you happy under this arrangement? Giselle looked back at Ichigo, who was now standing in front of Yasaka, who was looking very different. Her hair had come loose from her hair tie, her 9 tails were standing stock still, and her nails had gotten longer. Her eyes had the biggest change, having gone from gold on white to crimson-rimmed gold, the same crimson that her father's eyes were. And she was surrounded by a fiery red and golden glow. Father. I'll take him on. Fine. Leave one alive. Try to leave that one as Roos, I could probably heal him. I can try. With that, Yasaka simply vanished. As Not didn't even see the strike coming to his solar plexus, and he was launched back like a missile, crashing through the ruins of the palace. Giselle spun as soon as she saw his Not get launched, Roos spinning with her, a ball of energy spiking in his remaining hand. Holding it out, he prepared to launch his attack when Yasaka appeared in front of him, and his eyes widened in shock. So the dead do feel fear. That's good to know. Yasaka reached out and smothered Roos's attack with her hand, and then shit hit the fan. She squeezed and forcibly detonated the attack before it could be completed, and she charged out of the smoke with Roos's face in the palm of her hand, before she slammed him into the ground with enough force that a small earthquake would be all over the news the next day. I think you're done. She stood and faced Giselle, who was seething. How dare you mess up my doll? I'll make you pay. I swear it, one of these days I'll make you pay. She stomped her foot, her aim to open the Schattenbrike for her and his Not, but when nothing happened, she felt her blood run cold. She slammed her foot on the ground again. Open. 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 She was slamming her foot on the ground, the sound of her legs snapping every time it hit the floor was enough to make Kaora scowl. Giselle went to slam her foot on the ground once more when her legs simply vanished. What the? She looked up and saw Bambietta standing behind Yasaka, a bow in her hands. Oh, Bambi such a sweetie. Come to Mgak. Without warning, an arrow ripped through her stomach. You bitch. She screamed when an arrow ripped her arm from her shoulder, and again when another arrow took her other leg, causing her to fall to the ground, where she began to whimper. Stop it. Please. Stop it. I beg you. I be dot. Her head snapped back when an arrow lodged itself in her skull, punching out the other side. Giselle twitched a little before she lowered her head and looked straight at Bambietta. That wasn't very nice, little Bambi. I was asking for 4. An arrow punched a hole through her right eye. Why won't you die? Bambi walked forwards and fired another arrow through Giselle's head, before aiming 2 at her heart and 1 at her. The now corpse of Giselle slumped back, a pool of blood forming beneath her. Sighing, Ichigo turned to Yasaka, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, and tried to get her to calm down. Easy kiddo. Breathe. Nice and deep. In through the nose and out the mouth. The sound of an arrow burying itself in flesh made everyone spin, only to see Bambietta knocking another arrow, drawing it back, and firing it at the bloodied corpse of Giselle. She fired off 1 arrow. Whack. 2. Whack. 3. Whack. 4. Whack. 5. Whack. The hand stopped her from firing the 6th, and with tears in her eyes, she dispelled the bow and let herself fall back into the waiting arms of Yasaka, who wrapped her in a warm embrace. Her words rang in her mind. Oh, you poor thing. It's okay. It's over. It can't scare you anymore. It's dead and gone. I've got you now. I'll never let go. Yasaka turned Bambi to face her and with tears in her eyes, spoke quietly to her. If you ever want to talk about it, if you ever find yourself falling back into the darkness of today, know that I will always be there for you. I will be here, waiting, for the day you decide to talk. She gave her a smile, and Bambi broke. The tears that were threatening to fall the entire time burst forth, and her pained screams echoed out through the lonely ruins of the Kyoto palace. Once again, Yasaka felt a hand on her shoulder, and she looked up into her father's eyes. Yasaka. Take Bambi and Kunu. Now. Run. An explosion tore the ground apart, sending everyone everywhere. Taking Bambi into her arms, Yasaka darted towards Kunu, picking the child up as soon as she got to her. The Chroma. Mordred. Get them to Soul Society. Now. Yasaka will still be connected to the Lee lines there. Go. Now. When the dust cleared, everyone felt their blood run cold as a large feral-looking dragon had Ichigo pinned to the ground. Yusaka went to move to her father's aid but was stopped by Mordred and Akroma. "What are you doing? We have to help him." "We can't, my lady. That thing is called Samel. It seems like Chaos Brigade has finally made a move. To think the Chaos Brigade, the hero faction and Hades would be linked. This is truly a sad day for the supernatural." Akroma shook her head. Okaiwara, who was watching silently, drew his sword and made a move to assist Ichigo when an unnatural sense of death and foreboding landed on everyone. "Isaka. Mama." Isaka looked down at Bambi and Kunu, who were clutching her robes tightly and had their faces buried in her cloak. Swallowing with great difficulty, Yusaka looked around for the source of the malice that was causing the others a minor feeling of discomfort. Suddenly, Samel was flung violently across the courtyard, where he bounced and landed heavily against a collapsed wall, a long broken piece of wood digging into flesh, causing the monster known as Samel to roar loudly in pain. Everyone looked up at the person responsible and were shocked to see one person they never thought to see in the living world. Straightening up, cracking his neck and knuckles, shrouded by a mantle of dark that eroded everything in his path, a large scythe slung across his back, was Stramfastened, the horseman of death and the cardinal general of the north. "Now. Who the dares to touch my king nonchalantly? Come at me, I will show you that I can make even immortals fear death." Stram took a thundering step forwards, everyone in his path quaking with fear. Looking around, the grizzled titan of death quickly deduced the situation. "I see. Chaos Brigade. Lowly littlers think they can touch my king." Looking back at Samel, who was struggling to free itself from the wooden beam it was impaled on, he started to take long purposeful strides towards it, the creature snarling and frothing at the mouth, intent on removing itself from its wooden prison. Snarling slightly at the foul figure of Samel, Stram took one last step before vanishing from sight and perception and appeared right in front of the creature, fist cocked back and ready to unleash a powerful strike on the beast. "Excuse me, don't hurt my trump card, thank you." Samel snarled one last time before being enshrouded in shadows, whisked away at the last second. Frowning, Stram turned to face the person who took his enemy away and he found the battered, broken and extremely beaten form of Ichigo. "Oh? So the Quincy are in league with Chaos Brigade. Now this is old information. Come, last emperor. I still have a couple minutes left out in the world of the living, let me enjoy one fight at least." Stram once again shifted his position, moving at preternatural speeds, and appeared before Ichigo, scythe already cutting a trail across the Quincy's chest. Gasping in pain, Ichigo lashed out with whatever technique he had available. His fight with Ichigo hadn't gone according to his plans, and it turned out the king was far more powerful than anything he could have imagined. Speaking bluntly, Ichigo had beat him like a Cherokee drum. He had multiple fractures, his bones were very broken, and he was pretty sure Ichigo broke one of his ribs, ripped it out, and then stabbed him in the shoulder with it. Bastard was ruthless. "Forgive me, horseman, but now is not the time to fight. Lord Hades, assistance would be very much appreciated." Once the words left his mouth, an aura similar to that of Stram's descended on the battlefield before it wrapped itself around Ichigo and whisked him away. Good thing too, since Stram's scythe was an inch from taking his head clean off his shoulders. Looking at the remains of the battlefield, Stram turned to face his king. "Oops, he ran. Don't worry, we'll get him next time. He knows that we can get to him." And Hades rushed their escape. "Seems like he can't forget the time that I gave him his scar. Oh well, my time's up. See you back home." Waving, Stram opened a breach and crossed back, the stench of death following him. Sighing, Ichigo just leaned back against a broken wall. "I'll cover repairs." "Oh, that was a real shit show, wouldn't you say?" Ichigo dropped himself into a chair that had survived the battle, his eyes closing as he relaxed his entire body. "That sounds like one hell of an understatement, Lord Shiba." Ichigo cracked open an eye to see the hunched figure of the captain commander, standing silently at the remains of a doorway. "Did you see the palace before it was reduced to rubble?" "I did, and I agree it was a shit show." Ichigo choked on nothing before looking up at the old man, and he was 100% sure he could see a wry smile underneath the white beard. Regaining his composure, Ichigo stood. Ichigo has become more of a problem now that he is allied with Hades. We need to find a way to counter Samel that doesn't involve Stram coming out to the living realm. Jinrikisai looked at Ichigo. Who is that man anyway? His power was something that shook the very foundations of Soul Society, and he wasn't even in the dimension. Jinrikisai watched as Ichigo straightened and then leaned back into his chair with a tired look on his face. "Come with me. It's better if he tells you himself. And he can't come back here even if his life depended on it, not for another 40 days. Standing, Ichigo clicked his fingers, a hell breach opening on command, the dark walls of Horizon's reach, visible through the Tyrian dimensions. "Mind yourself there. There are 5 people on the other side of this that are far more powerful than you. The Cardinal Generals, as you called them. No, the Yondai ma'am. The four great Satans. Surzich is Lucifer, Ajuka Beelzebub, Seraphol Leviathan and Falbium Asmodeus. Plus Stram, that makes 5. I'm not your enemy and won't ever be. But they are different. Why? Because they only know the sins you have committed. So you're telling me that Ichigo is bringing the head captain of Soul Society to hell? Yup. And they haven't tried killing each other? Nope. Do you think they will? I heard the old man is powerful, maybe even to rival us, well, back when he was at his prime. No, I don't think they will. And do not underestimate the head captain. Aizen did all those years ago and almost paid a terrible price. Plus, Ichigo isn't someone who would bring a threat into our home. Wow, you really trust the guy, don't you, Ulquiorra? Yes. Now, can we not question Ichigo's decision anymore, Mordred? Fine, fine. But I bet you a month's worth of my wages that they will be fighting by the end of the day. Mordred. Don't make that bet with Ulquiorra, you'll lose badly. I have to agree with the Chroma, that's a dumb bet, Mordred. Ah. You just don't want to see the newbie without cash for the month. No, we don't want to see you without cash for the month. Stram leaned back against the bench in their secret bar, watching his juniors compete and make stupid bets. I'll take that bet, Mordred. Ulquiorra spoke up after taking a swig of his drink, savoring the taste of alcohol for the first time in a long time. As a hollow, he could get drunk, but he could never taste what he ate or drank, that's why he was never adverse to drinking tea back in Las Noches. Oh yeah. Sorry Ulquiorra, but you're gonna lose this one. Mordred stuck her hand out and the former hollow shook it, cementing the bet. You two are my witnesses for today. Make sure he pays up. Mordred skipped off out a doorway, headed to her room to make sure the preparations for her victory and months worth of extra pay were ready. The Chroma just looked blankly at Ulquiorra. Don't be mean, dear. If she wishes to fight me then she will lose. This isn't a fight. You're right, it's war. Unbeknownst to the arguing couple, Stram looked up and raised an eyebrow at the comment from their newest member. He would fit war to a glove. Did you say something, Stram? Yeah, just apologizing to Mordred in advance. I gotta go meet Ichigo and Jinrikisai Dono. Excuse me. Stram walked off, his mind grinding gears that had long been dormant. Stram, welcome, please, sit. Nodding, the Cardinal General of the North sat opposite the old head captain, who was gazing at him intently. Is something the matter, Jinrikisai Dono? The man huffed before he started to stroke his long beard. Yes, back in the living realm, you had this aura of death around you, any which called you a horseman. Am I correct in assuming that you have biblical origins? That's correct. There were only 2 people who knew my real identity, but now it seems that it's going to be common knowledge by week's end. I am formerly the Horseman of Death. I was recruited by Ichigo at the end of the Great War 1000 years ago to become the pillar of his new vision. He wanted me to be something more than just the Pale Rider, the Horseman of Death, he wanted me to be a Cardinal General. I've never been offered such a position before, so when he offered me it for the first time, I laughed quite loud, then Ichigo threw me through a wall. Granted, he was just coming off the death of Lucifer and the end of the Great War, which was something that had ended up changing all of us. Stram paused, took a deep breath, and continued. He also promised me comrades, people who wouldn't die by being in my presence, and also how to control my vast and dangerous power. Surprisingly, Shinigami techniques work extremely well for me. I can't use Keto or any other techniques, but I can use Flash Step. Stram laughed at the memory of learning the high-speed movement technique for the first time and the resulting chaos. Ichigo just sighed. Stram, you went through 5 walls. Laughing doesn't pay for repairs. Stram laughed and looked the other way. Sorry, boss. And don't forget that you still owe me for the chicken coop and the kitten nursery. Stram rubbed the back of his head and laughed nervously. But the kitten nursery was all a Chroma's idea. But you were the one who endorsed her. Henceforth you pay. A Chroma has to deal with all the shit that comes out of that place on a daily basis, even I do. There is no chance in hell that I'm going to let Anna go in there to clean it out. Jinrikisai stifled a laugh under his beard. Are you that protective of your queen, Lord Shiba? Hell no, Anna can most definitely take care of herself. I'm more worried about losing my wife to that damned nursery for the next 1000 years. Have you seen those little monsters? They are too cute and adorable and fluffy, and did I say cute? Ichigo crossed his arms, shaking his head in the process. Sorry. Kinda getting off track here. Nodding, Jinrikisai leaned forwards. Iwich. How much of a threat is he to you? 0. I'm far stronger than he can ever be, even if he succeeds in absorbing the power of the Soul King, and his eyes are open, there is no way he could ever see me, let alone move fast enough to catch me. Leaning back, Ichigo motioned for Stram to come over, and the man did so. Stram, can you actually go and begin the repair process on Yusaka's palace? I don't want her to be without a home for too long. Especially now that I know she has both Kunu and Bambi. Right away, boss. Is there anything you want Mordred and Achroma to pick up from the world of the living when I send them there? Actually, now that you mention it, we are running out of tea, coffee and hot chocolate and matcha. Get them to pick some up whilst they're out. Right away. By your leave. Bound to both Ichigo and Jinrikisai, Stram made his way out of the room, gently closing the door behind him. There is one more thing I would like to ask you. Looking up, Ichigo raised an orange brow. Shoot. Where are the other horsemen? Chuckling, Ichigo smiled rather sinisterly. I know where they are, but they haven't awoken as the horsemen yet. There has to be a certain process according to Stram, who awoke after slaughtering an entire continent a millennia ago. Currently, Ulquiorra Cypher is the most promising recruit to take the mantle of Horsemen of War. Achroma Yamamoto is to take Famine due to Ragnarok, and Mordred Pendragon is to take Pestilence because of her burning desire for vengeance. There are rumors of someone in Hell trying to hasten the process and forcefully create artificial horsemen, a process that ended up with me having to crater half of Lucifid in order to rid the underworld of them. It took a while to restore it, but we got it right in the end. Leaning back, Ichigo waved away the concerns of the head captain. I know what you're thinking. If these things were to make their way to either the world of the living or Soul Society, then they would be virtually unstoppable due to the strife they could cause. I tell you now not to worry because the only thing that can kill a horseman is a horseman. With Stram on our side, there is no way they can escape. What about the ones that you had to crater the city for? If only a horseman can kill a horseman, then how did you kill them? I only cratered half the city, Jinrikisai, Stram killed them. Nodding in understanding, Jinrikisai tapped his cane on the floor. I see. My worries have been placated for now. Thank you, Lord Shiba, for having this faith in me considering everything that has happened to you under my reign in Soul Society. Please, far worse things could have happened. Let's just hope to Lucifer that things only get better from here. Now, I have to go introduce my children to their grandfather and their aunts. Let me escort you out first. Clicking his fingers, he created a breach in the meeting room, one that led directly to the Captain Commander's office in Soul Society. Now that we know your breaches can bypass the Shakinmaku, I can most definitely count on your support should Iwich try anything within the walls of the Sirte. Of course. My idiot father lives there with my sisters. There is no way that I would abandon them. Never again. I see. Thank you for the conversation, Lord Shiba. If only we could have avoided the conflict at the beginning of our meetings, then this would have ended much faster and we would have made some semblance of peace much sooner. Bowing his head slightly, Jinrikisai stepped through the breach, turned, and watched it close from his office. That meeting had gone far better than he could have ever predicted. Shiba Ichigo was still alive, and he ruled Hell, and he is now on amicable terms again with Soul Society. Granted he couldn't call them allies as of yet, he would slowly work his way to that. But currently, as things stood, they were looking at each other in a far better light. Smiling softly under his white beard, Jinrikisai Yamamoto summoned a Hell Butterfly, calling a captain's meeting to order. He had many things to discuss with them. Ichigo. Turning his head, Ichigo saw his father standing by the door, a gentle smile on his face. Voyage Ichigo made his way back to the couch he sat on for his conversation with Jinrikisai and dropped back into it, letting out a deep sigh. This is all 5 ways from Ed up, wouldn't you say? I completely agree. Also, don't let your sisters ever hear you using that language. Didn't stop you much all those years ago. Isin looked at him. You remember? That far back, you still remember? Smiling sadly, Ichigo looked at his father. As if it were yesterday. Defeating Aizen, losing my powers, only to find out they were holding something far more sinister at bay. But he stopped and looked away, his gaze falling on the bustling city that lay far beneath them. I wouldn't give any of it up. Ever. Good man. Ichigo looked at his father once again, his eyes softening. So, Nujutsu form. Want to talk about it? Ha. Yeah. Nujutsu. While I'm in this form, my power is just slightly easier to control. I know I've never really had control over my powers, you don't need to remind me of it. But this form it feels whole. Like I'm using all the parts of my power. He leaned back in his chair. Enough about me, have you met my girls? If you're talking about Yusaka, she has already refused to call me grandfather dearest about 15 times now. Ichigo laughed. I think you'll have better luck with Senna. She adores mom, so I bet she'll be happy to meet you. Isin smiled at Ichigo. I'll bring Yuzu and Karen. Bring Yusaka as well. Pant. She needs to be connected to the Lee lines in Kyoto. So if you want them to meet, it's gotta either be in Soul Society, which falls loosely under Amaterasu's domain, or back in Kyoto, which is being reconstructed. How about the Shiba Mansion in Soul Society? It got rebuilt. Of course it did. Once the old man took over, he ordered that the Shiba and Shihoin families be reinstated to noble status and all their assets returned. That includes the original Shiba Mansion in District 1 of Rukongai. Interesting. Alright then. I'll bring Senna and the others, and you bring everyone else. I'll also bring Kisuke and Yoruichi. Heh? Kisuke and Yoruichi? You know where they are? Of course I do. Kisuke has been with me in hell since close to the beginning of my time there, and Yoruichi, for some reason we are still trying to deduce, wound up in hell after being killed in Soul Society. There are others, but they are a surprise that I'm sure you'd enjoy. Isin frowned, but let the topic slide as he glanced at the clock on the wall. It's getting late, I gotta go back. Hey, just quickly. Is there some sort of time limit that a person from hell can stay in the world of the living? Sinners, bound by the chains, yes. A citizen of hell, like mom and myself, no. There is no time limit. We aren't bound by the chains. Hell does not own us. Therefore, we can come and go as we please. I see. That's good to know. That means Misaki doesn't have to stay in hell. Exactly. And from what she has told me, mom wants to return to the world of the living, something that I completely agree with. I want her here with you guys so there is an extra set of hands defending the place. She's strong, and her blood can withstand a Jitsuga from me. Isin froze, before looking back at Ichigo as he was walking out the door. What do you mean, Ichigo? How do you know that she can take a Jitsuga? How do you know about blood? How did you know about Yoruichi? There are reasons that I know what I know. Reasons I will tell you about, just not now and not here. After everything settles for the lull in the fighting, I'll come get you and bring you to a wicked bar we got here in the castle. It's one of the handful of locations that is 100% secure, since not many people know of its existence. Just the Cardinal Generals, Anna and myself. Standing, Ichigo walked over to his dad, who stood at his full height. It's good seeing you again, Ichigo. I hope that we can become a family again, but when you're ready. I'll be waiting, Dad. I'm tired of our family being broken. Now that Anna, Yusaka and Senna are part of the family, there is no way in hell that I'm letting them live without knowing their whole family. Clicking his fingers, Ichigo opened a hell breach back to the clinic in the world of the living. Head to Soul Society in a couple days, bring Yuzu and Karen with you. I'll take Anna and Senna with me to pick up Yusaka, Bambi and Kunu, and then head to Soul Society from there. Can you ask the old man to get me authorization to use the main gate? I mean I can get around it, but if there is to be some semblance of amity between us, then I guess we gotta use the main gate. Chuckling, Isin placed a hand on Ichigo's shoulder. Of course, I'll call him once I get inside. I'll ask Misaki if she remembers how to make that curry you love, so we have something to bring to the mansion. Oh please do. That curry was delicious. I know right. I've tried to recreate it, but I always fail. Ichigo crossed his arms. You as well. I've been trying for the better part of 200 years, and I am still no closer to making that curry. Yuzu can make it, but me? Nope, every time I try it comes out differently. You see, the same thing happens to me. I tried 3 times in the same day and got 4 different flavors. Ichigo looked at him with suspicion leaking from every part of him. I know it freaked me out as well, but I tried it once and got 1 flavor, and the next spoon had another flavor. The next 2 were completely different as well. I have no idea how Yuzu figured it out. Guess we'll have to get the answers from her. She won't give it up. I've tried everything, from bribes to fake kidnappings. Nothing. She refuses to relinquish the details. She even stabbed me with an arrow to keep her secrets. You're kidding. An arrow? Is she using her Quincy heritage? Both of them are. Karen has a better grasp of the movement techniques and has more combat ability, whilst Yuzu is smarter, understands the more difficult theories, and applies them excellently in battle. She used a class 8 Quincy technique to manipulate the arrow into my leg to get away that day. She made you stab yourself in the leg with an arrow using Ransa Tengai, didn't she? Shut up. Thought so. I hate you so much right now, Ichigo. Love you too, Go-chin. Edgelord Beansprout. What the actual is that supposed to mean? You wear black and you're super tall and lanky. Sighing, Ichigo just rubbed his forehead. Whatever. I'll see you soon, right? Of course, son. Of course. Right, laters then, old man. Waving as he walked through the breach, Isin went to take a quick jab at Ichigo, but a hand reached out, grabbed him and threw him through the clinic wall and onto a hospital bed. Great placement since he was now broken. Why? Sorry, father-in-law. Isin sprung from the bed, his broken everything temporarily forgotten. He glimpsed a yellow-eyed, violet-haired woman just as the breach closed, leaving Isin to ponder the many things he had spoken about with his son. This is gonna be fun. Family reunions are gonna be the greatest now. Oh yeah, brag. Isin collapsed as his body suddenly remembered it basically was a pile of jelly. Someone help please. His whispers fell on an empty house. He was found a day later in a room flooded with his own tears, a poster of Misaki being used to keep his head afloat. I think it's time for me to get some shut-eye. It's been a long few days, and I think everyone needs to take a day off tomorrow. Turning, Ichigo began making his way to the throne room, the place he's been sleeping ever since Senna was conceived. Ichigo. He stopped, turning his head so he could look at the speaker. I want you to stay with me from now on. Anna walked up to him, gently placing a hand on his arm and resting her head on his shoulder. I miss my husband, and the bed is awfully large and cold for me to be using it alone. Anna, I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should move on. What's happened has happened, Ichigo. It's time we both took a step forwards and accepted what occurred. But nothing. The light of our lives came from that ritual. I wouldn't have it any other way. If I was forced to choose between denying the ritual and having the ritual, with everything that I know now, I would choose to have it 1,000 times over. Senna is the best thing that could have ever happened to us. She had him on the, then reached down and entwined her fingers in his. And now, there is another little ball of energy on her way, so I believe that she had his again. We deserve some alone time. She pulled him into their bedroom, a place Ichigo hadn't stepped foot into for quite some time. Even though every part of him was telling him that she was working her magic against him, manipulating him with her eyes, her hair, the sway of her hips, Ichigo Kurosaki Shiba wholeheartedly gave himself to the woman he loves. She was the only one whom he would let get away with this. He leaned down and at her. I agree. Using his foot, Ichigo closed the door and clicked his fingers, making sure to add a few barriers just in case. The rustling of the sheet stirred him from his slumber, coupled with a weight on his chest that seemed to be perfect. Blinking the sleep away from his eyes, Ichigo slowly looked around, his eyes finding the worst damage in seconds. The bedposts were broken, the mirror smashed, the dresser was broken as well, the curtains had been ripped off their hinges and were currently being used as bed sheets because the actual bed sheets were nowhere to be seen. Looking down, he found a violet-haired demon queen lying peacefully on his chest. Smiling at the serene expression on her face, Ichigo let his head rest back on the pillow and closed his eyes, feeling the sensation of sleep pulling him under. Knock knock, Lord Ichigo. Are you in there? Groaning, Ichigo gently lifted Anna off him, to which she responded to by waking up. Someone's knocking, aren't they? Yup, I'm going to kill them. Hey. Person at the door. Who are you? It's Akroma. Nope, can't kill her. Ulquiorra might kill me. He's far more powerful now. It's actually a little scary. He laughed as Anna sat up, the curtains falling off her shoulders, revealing her body to him. He just sat there, staring, for a full minute before he made up his mind. Akroma. Still there? Yes, my lord, do you require something? Yes, for you to leave and inform everyone to not disturb honor me for the rest of the day. Everyone can take a day off. Bye. Akroma heard a soft snap come from within the room before all sound just vanished. Sighing, Akroma walked off, calling a maid over. Lord Ichigo is not to be disturbed for the remainder of the day. Understood. Yes, milady. The maid curtsied and scurried off to deliver the news to the rest of the castle. Might as well visit Ulki, see how the south is faring under his command. Skipping off, Akroma now had a destination in mind. Akroma skidded to a halt as the scream echoed throughout the castle. She knew the voice, she had heard it many times before. She darted off towards the throne room, her heart pounding as her mind came up with reasons as to why she would scream. Slamming the doors open, she was greeted by a rather strange scene. On her hands and knees was Mordred, tears falling from her eyes, fists clenched as she slammed them into the ground. Standing above her, at the top of the small steps that led to the throne, was Ulquiorra and Stram, the latter looking rather amused. What is sweet Lucifer is going on here? Ulquiorra and Stram looked at her. The former, in his usual monotone, with an underlying hint of amusement, pointed his finger at Mordred. She owes me a month's pay from the bet. I refuse to acknowledge that they didn't fight. Perhaps they fought in their minds. Mordred shouted out rather smugly, and it was then that it finally hit Akroma. Mordred, are you broke? Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the JERMAINE94 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.